Bore da gyfeillion a chroeso I Bwyllgor Archwilio Iechyd a Gofal Digidol Cymru. Good morning and welcome to the Audit and Assurance Committee for Digital Health and Care Wales. We have a full agenda this morning, so we will be devoting, as is practice now, to give some quality time to look in more detail at workforce planning, which is an area of particular challenge and priority for us. I am planning to finish today's public session, for the record, by about 12:30. And we'll be taking a short break before the private session, which is scheduled to start at 12:40. We will take a short break between sections 4 and 5 of today's committee around 11:10. And for the record, I have agreed to move items and to rejuggle the agenda a little bit. So moving items 4.5, 5.4 and 5.5, all items regarding workforce planning arrangements, the deep dive on workforce and the recruitment update to the start of the agenda. So this will hopefully allow presenters to leave to attend other meetings they have scheduled. And then we'll resume the normal agenda following these items. So first, can I specifically welcome external colleagues, David Murphy from Audit Wales for agenda item 4.5, the Review Workforce Planning Arrangements Report. Welcome David Thomas, the Audit Wales Director, who's presenting item 4.6, the Audit Wales Annual Report. And also welcome to colleagues Sarah Jane Taylor, Director of People and OD, and Shikala Mansfield, Head of People and OD, who will be attending to present those two items on the deep dive on workforce development and the recruitment update to the Welsh language report. And last, welcome also to the Deputy Head of Counter Fraud, Henry Bales, who's deputising for Gareth Lavington. So you can see that there is a full agenda. So as is usual now, the committee is being recorded, and this recording will be posted on DHCW's website. The meeting papers are, as ever, available for members of the public to access via our website. So then let's turn to apologies for absence. I have apologies from Alistair Class-Neil, independent member, from Gareth Lavington, the Head of Counter Fraud, Ivan Evans, Executive Director of Strategy, with Michelle Sell deputising, Carwyn Lloyd-Jones, Director of ICT, and Darren Griffiths of Audit Wales. Declarations of interest then. I've not been notified of any declarations or conflicts of interests. I'd just like to note my connection with the More Than Words Welsh Language Action Plan, which I chaired, the Chasg and Finish group. But can I just check whether there are any other declarations of interest to note? If not, then let's move on to part 2 and the consent agenda. Now, to ensure that we focus our discussions on business critical activity, we are using the consent agenda, but I'd just like to check whether there's anything within that consent agenda that colleagues would like to move to the main agenda. No? If not, then I'm assuming that you've all read the papers. I'm going to take it that all members are therefore happy to approve and note the items on the consent agenda. So specifically, we are approving the minutes, item 2.1, from committee meetings held on October the 17th, 2023. That's both public and private abridged minutes. We are noting the NHS Wales Shared Services Partnership Committee Assurance Report, item 2.2. We are noting the contents of the Forward Work Plan, item 2.3, which you'll see include items scheduled to come to future committee meetings. We are noting the COVID-19 inquiry update, item 2.4, and I note that the Senedd COVID-19 Special Purpose Inquiry has met on January the 30th of this year, and no doubt we'll hear more about this inquiry in addition to the UK inquiry in future meetings. We are endorsing the Audit and Assurance Committee annual report for approval to the board. And thank you to colleagues who prepared this report, as it really reflects the breadth of work covered by the committee during the last financial year. We are noting for assurance the committee effectiveness self-assessment, and pleasing that members have commented in general very positively on the effectiveness of the committee and specifically how it has matured over the past 12 months. And I think there's been a positive response to the addition of the board assurance deep dives, which I'm sure we all agree provide some further assurance to committee members. Colleagues will be aware of the importance of open discussion, constructive challenge, which the self-assessment suggests is in place. And I would actively encourage colleagues that this candour continues this morning, both from committee members, from auditor colleagues, as well as officers. Diolch i chi. So we are approving then to move on the updated Audit and Assurance Committee Terms of Reference, item 2.7. We are approving the Audit and Assurance Committee Cycle of Business and noting the Welsh Health Circular Report for Assurance, which is item 2.9. We are noting that with feedback from DHCW's finance team, we are to note that there are no losses and special payments for the committee's consideration today, which is item 2.10. And noting the standards of behaviour report, item 2.11, and particularly pleasing to note that we have now received and captured over 97% of band 8A declarations of interest, in addition to 29% of declarations from other members of staff. And finally, then, we are noting the Raising Concerns report, item 2.12. And as the independent member board champion for Raising Concern, I should say that it's been particularly helpful to see the work taking place to promote the Raising Concerns process. And can I take this opportunity then to thank all the officers that have been that have contributed to the preparing of the reports in the consent agenda. So that brings us to the end of part 2 business. And with your support, I will now move us on to the main agenda and to section 3. We'll open with the action log then. And as you'll see from that report, there were 6 actions captured from our committee meeting held on October the 17th, all of which I am pleased to note are complete. Can I first check whether you've any comments or queries in relation to those actions marked as complete? No? Then we are being asked to note the status of the action log. That takes us then to our revised, the reshuffled agenda, and I'm moving us on to agenda item 4.5 then, which is the review of workforce planning arrangements. Now, I'd just like to invite David Murphy from Audit Wales to present this particular review, and I shall be asking Sarah Jane and Shikla Mansfield to respond to any questions and queries. So David, I'll hand over to you then, if I may. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. This is the review of workforce planning arrangements for DHCW. It is also a national review, so we have been looking at national themes as well as part of this review. So what we did was we conducted 7 formal interviews, meeting observations and notes, detailed review of 47 documents, as well as quite a number of follow-up informal discussions. And I'd particularly like to thank Sarah Jane and Shikla for those follow-up discussions. And we had quite a lot of detailed discussions around the report. So you've obviously got a copy of the report. So just to pick out the highlights of the key findings, we found that DHCW is improving its strategic approach to workforce planning and is taking steps to manage current workforce challenges. We felt there was scope to increase focus on the longer term, which is beyond the 3-year sort of IMTP based cycles, and improve arrangements for monitoring and oversight to ensure that the actions are having the desired impact that you're looking for. Just by way of context, at the time of the review, obviously we were aware your workforce was growing substantially. I think it was by around 25% at the time, to just over 1,100 full-time staff. So in terms of the 3 themes of the report, just to pick out the highlight messages. So in terms of your strategic approach to workforce planning, DHCW is improving its strategic approach to workforce planning, but we felt it needs an implementation plan to guide that delivery and a greater focus on addressing some of those longer term risks, back to that sort of overarching key message. People and OD strategy focuses on the short to medium term, and whilst DHCW is taking steps to improve strategic workforce planning, it needs that greater focus, as we said, and also looking at the workforce risks in the longer term. So at present, the organisation does not yet have a detailed implementation plan to deliver the strategy, or didn't at the time of the review, to be more accurate. The organisation is taking positive steps to better understand current future workforce demands and is improving workforce intelligence. There was quite a detailed piece of work going on at the time, and I'm aware we had some discussions about that. But the schedule's the schedule, and it's a snapshot in time, so I think it's fair to point that out. We also noted the commitments to engaging with internal and external stakeholders was particularly strong around your strategic workforce. So in terms of the second theme, which was operational action to manage workforce challenges, the overarching message there is that DHCW is effectively managing its workforce challenges and current risks, but will need to keep its resources to support that workforce planning under review. So there were a number of programs, you were moving to your program approach, a number of programs which may be extended or may not at that time. So we just felt that was something that did need to be kept under review. DHCW has a reasonable level of resource to support the current workforce planning at the time of the review, but as we said, we needed to think about those sort of what was needed in the future. The organisation understands and actively manages its workforce risks with mitigating actions that are helping to reduce the level of workforce risk, was one of the other messages on the operational side. And again, developing directorate level workforce plans and improving workforce data has the potential to highlight any new workforce risks. So we were noting that DHCW is actively and appropriately managing its current workforce challenges through a range of recruitment, retention and workforce development activities. The third area was monitoring and oversight of workforce plans, and there we felt that the board maintains reasonable oversight of workforce matters. There needs to be a stronger focus on the extent to which those actions are having an impact. So metrics that demonstrate impact we felt needed a little bit of further work. The board had reasonable oversight of the people and OD strategy, and you'd received a year 1 update in September 2023. It also had oversight over a limited number of these workforce metrics, as I've already mentioned. So there are opportunities to improve workforce metrics. The people and OD strategy update reports have having a greater focus on impact. So those are the overall messages, and then you'll note from the report there are 3 recommendations. One around implementation plan, which I've already mentioned, which is that ensuring the organisation develops a more detailed implementation plan with milestones, measures, targets, and responsible leads for each action area. Managing your risks is you developing that directorate level plans. The third one was performance monitoring. We found that the board receives regular but limited workforce performance information. And then finally, oversight of the people and OD strategy. So at least twice a year, the board should be receiving those updates on people and OD strategy to look at progress against the actions and the impact of those actions. And that's the report. So again, just sorry to finish, I would like to formally thank Sarah Jane and Shikla and all of the DHEW staff who helped us considerably in pulling that report together. And any questions you want to ask?
Diolch, David. Thank you. A very helpful highlight of that detailed and very helpful report, David. Can I check whether there are any questions or queries from colleagues at this point? Claire, thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, David, for your report. And I think this was highlights, I think, some key things. We've seen a significant growth in DHEW's workforce, really fueled by the development of the Digital Priorities Investment Funding, which is non-recurrent, and the problems that brings in terms of recruiting into those positions and keeping those people. And the heartening thing to see is how the report highlights that DHEW has the lowest turnover and actually one of the lowest sickness rates when you look at it in comparison to other parties against NHS in Wales. I think the other bit to note is subsequent to this, together with the exec team, we are looking at the longer term plans within DHEW and the workforce implications in beyond 3 years, in particular looking at the implication of moving to a product-based cloud delivery and what does that mean for our core workforce and its culture. But equally, with the consolidation, as you can imagine, this year we've had quite a number of programs being integrated into DHEW, and it's then the emphasis there is really on standardization, simplification, and really optimization of those program skills, bearing in mind the backdrop of that funding constraints that we have in trying to have a more sustainable longer term workforce plan underpinning that. So I think the report was very informative, and actually it's highlighted the need to actually spend and invest time in the longer term plans, which together with Sarah and the team and the exec team, we are now really come to grips with. And hopefully you'll see some of that transpire into our IMTP as we finalise it towards the end of this month and next. Thanks.
Diolch, Claire. Thank you for those comments. I'm going to move us on to Chris, then Ruth, and then Sarah Jane, if I may. So, Chris.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, echo what Claire said. Actually, one of the points I wanted to raise was just we're consulting at the moment on our long-term strategy. So it's on our website and encourage partners and stakeholders to provide some feedback on that. One of the principles within the strategy is putting people first, and obviously it looks over the long term to 2030. So just picking up David's point, it's the perfect opportunity to look beyond the 3-year planning cycle, which we are doing from a workforce planning perspective. And then the other point, Chair, was just, I know I mentioned it, I think at the last meeting or previous meeting, but the All Wales thematic on workforce planning arrangements, really helpful report from Audit Wales on a national basis. One of the things that's a challenge for us organisationally is digital staff are categorised within A&C, admin and clerical. So it's really hard for us to break that down and do, the additional analysis that we would want to organisationally. So just wanted to make that point, and hopefully we can influence that situation and position. I mean, it's the same for other areas. I think estates are lumped into that, which will be a challenge for some of those functions, but it would be better if we could break that down further.
Diolch, Chris. Thank you. Ruth, can I just check, is your hand still up? Were you wanting to contribute?
I think largely Claire and Chris covered the points that I wanted to make. I think the only additional bit I'd add on to the point Chris made about the job family piece is that specifically within Welsh Government, they do look at how do they increase remuneration specifically for digital professionals. It's a big push across the public sector, and it would seem not consistent if we didn't then have something similar. So I think it is an issue that actually our digital professionals are within a job family, which makes it very difficult actually to compete in the market. And whilst we never can fully compete, the gap is currently so large that it does cause an issue. So I think other bits of the public sector do have a specific focus on digital staff. I think it is definitely something that we need to keep pushing for. Thank you.
Thank you. Those comments are well made, and I'm sure Sarah Jane will want to respond and endorse those comments. So Sarah Jane, would you like to come in now, please?
Yes, thank you, Marion. And that everyone's stolen all my thunder, actually, because I was going to say everything that everyone said already, which especially Claire, actually. So no, absolutely. So thank you for the audit and the report. I think we've got a lot out of it, and really just for assurance of the audit committee is this was for a point in time some time ago, actually, and we've reflected on this, and I think I said at the board meeting at the last board, we've moved quite a pace, actually, because I think at that point in time we were very much concentrating on at least a year plan, where now we're moving into much more strategic place. And just building on what Claire said about the product approach and transformation, we're doing quite a lot in that space now. And I think actually it's quite exciting times. We've got the digital strategy coming through, hopefully in March. So the plan is with the strategic resourcing group and my team and professional leads, we'll be launching the strategic workforce planning for the 24-25 round. And actually it will be a lot more strategic. So I think that's quite exciting for us. So I think last time around we got a lot out of it. We got a lot of our skills gap analysis and our development plans, which we've implemented, which is great with partners. But this is going to give us a forecast in detail for a year, but also look at the 2+ year, the 5+ year, and actually that's going to give us a lot more skin in the game, really. So I think we're really quite excited about what that's going to do. I mean, we've been working with Gartner and other partners, and also taking on board sort of external feedback, and audit being one of those, to build and develop and make sure we've got the best product in this instance, to take forward something really robust and informative to give us exactly what we need for the future, and we're fit for the future. So exciting times, really good assurance, I hope, for the future, and welcoming that review, because it improves and develops continuously in terms of our input and how we're developing these things. So yeah, really exciting. So thank you.
Thank you, Sarah Jane Taylor, for those comments. The committee then is being asked to note the review workforce planning arrangements for assurance. And I'm very grateful to David for presenting this report today. And as you heard from Sarah Jane, it was a point in time, and I think we've moved on considerably from that. And this report and the response actually provides a great deal of assurance for this committee in what is clearly a high-risk area for us, which is clearly being effectively mitigated. Thank you. This brings us nicely then on to our next agenda item then, agenda item 5.4, which is the Board Assurance Framework Escalation Deep Dive. So it's my pleasure now to invite Sarah Jane back to present this, supported by Shikara. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Chair. Absolutely. So hopefully everyone's had an opportunity to read the paper, and I just want to say thank you to Shikara, who actually wrote the paper. So thank you very much. It was a really detailed piece of work. I'll just go through a couple of the salient points, but I think hopefully we'll use this session as a bit of questions and answers, really. So it's a deep dive. And some of you on our board have heard some of the information that we provided some months ago. But yes, we've had the strategy now since September 22. So we did our year report in September, and that was at the SHA board, and it's really focusing on the key component points of extraordinary leadership. And we've done a lot in the leadership space in terms of leadership development for the 8Cs and above. We've got the talent development for the 6s to 8Bs. And Chris Darling, Board Secretary, and I are at the moment finalising the approach to the emerging talent, so everyone up to Band 6. We've also done a piece on succession planning, which is a work in progress, which will develop further and hopefully be embedded once we've done our strategic workforce planning this year. But we've got a really good foundation. We've worked with our partners with Gartner to develop the best in practice design for that. In terms of the great organisation to work, as committee members will know, we won the Best Place to Work in IT last year, which was fantastic. We've put a lot of emphasis on culture and organisational development, and as part of our leadership plans and offerings, everything that we've done has got all of the new values, culture development, leadership, and the behavioural framework embedded within all of the programmes. So that's been quite an exciting addition, and really starting to sort of see some benefits from that, really. We've set up the EDI network, and we've got a strategic equality plan, which was signed off last April, and that has 6 monthly updates to the SHA board. That's been a fantastic inclusion piece within the organisation, and really helping us drive thinking differently, communicating differently, and supporting us with policies, and really making sure that we're linking in with research and innovation as well to get the best of everything that we do and to embed that. We've just heard quite a lot about the strategic workforce planning, but there is a lot of stuff being invested in this area, both currently and for the future. So this is a big focus and a big work stream for us in terms of getting the right information at the right time and making sure we shape and develop that to take us forward, which is really quite exciting. And this year's round will start in April after the launch of the digital strategy, hopefully at the end of March once that's signed off. So there's some really great stuff in that space. I think the other big addition will be our work that Shikala and I will take across the whole of Wales, which will be looking at the career pathways and the DDAP frameworks, carrying on from the actions of the workforce review, which Shikala and other partners took forward a few years ago, actually. So that should be another exciting addition that will give us more standardisation and consistency for the future. And as you just said, Chair, resourcing is a constant problem, really, because it's a challenge. We're working in a very competitive marketplace. There's lots of challenges in this arena. So recruiting, talent into the organisation and retaining talent is something that we're really focusing on. So we're doing a lot of work with apprentices, graduates, bringing new people and diversity, and looking at the wider geography to bring people into the organisation for all different roles, and to look at how we're retaining people in a really positive way and developing people. So we've done a lot in the talent space under our Grow Your Own agenda. As I said earlier about growing our career pathways will be some of the national work that we're going to be taking forward as the leader in that space, and just really focusing very much on talent and partnership and collaborative working. Wellbeing and engagement, again, is another key feature, a key theme of the strategy. This has had a lot of investment and support. And when I say investment, not potentially money, but people being involved. We're doing some community outreach. We're looking at a huge piece of communications and support next year. This year, sorry, 24, 25. I'm sort of talking from April onwards, but this has been a really good piece of work in the last year, with lots of people getting involved, voluntary, as well as part of their work programmes, and making sure that we're looking after people's well-being. Now we're working in a new way. A lot of us are working in a hybrid configuration, so making sure that when people are in the office or at home, we're doing those well-being check-ins, we're supporting people, we're looking at hotspots, and we're really driving support and improvement in those spaces so that people know where to go for support and help as needed. And finally, new ways of working. We're all looking at technology and how we're working differently, and how we're supporting our work programmes in a different way. But as Claire alluded to earlier, we're doing a big piece from April onwards, looking at a transformation to product, how that's going to affect the workforce, how we're going to drive culture transformation. And it's going to be quite exciting. I think we're going to be looking at things quite differently of how we're working together, bringing together that knowledge sharing, that teamwork, that partnership approach, and really making sure everyone has got a different way of working, but they're developed along the way. So there'll be a lot of work developing in that space, and I'll obviously provide the board and other key committees updates and that as we go along, but we will all be involved in that. So the organisation will look slightly different this time next year than it does at the moment, and I think we just need to keep up with pace, and we work in a very competitive, ever-changing environment, so we need to make sure that we are as well. So lots of investment and time in that area, and yeah, interesting times ahead really, which we'll all be involved in. So at that point, I'd welcome any questions to me and Shikala to talk about anything in the paper or anything else that anyone would like to know a little bit more information on. Thank you.
Thank you, Sarah Jane. That's a very clear highlight of a vast range of activities that's going on in this area, which gives us a high level of assurance, I'm sure. Perhaps I could kick off before I turn to colleagues. You've talked about a range of different programs to attract a greater range of people into the organisation. We are a national organisation, and perhaps you could give me some assurance that we are really looking at potential across Wales. We are largely an organisation that's based in the southeast of Wales, but clearly 3/4 of the population of Wales live outside that area. So I guess I'm looking for assurance that we are exploring potential right across Wales.
Yes, absolutely. Thank you. It's a good opportunity to talk about that, actually. And yeah, so you're absolutely right. So what we did last year was we did a bit of a mapping exercise to look at where everybody lived, actually, just as a bit of a starter, to sort of understand where people were commuting from, where the base offices were. But it gave us actually a really good baseline of, so where are people living? You know, how many people actually live in Wales? Where do people live in North Wales, West Wales, South Wales? And you're absolutely right. We came up with, unsurprisingly, quite a lot of information. So most people live on the south of Wales, and there were quite a lot of people that lived in various different parts, but not as concentrated. And also some people living in different areas in England. We had some people in Newcastle and London, and some people in Scotland. I think a couple of people in Northern Ireland as well. So yes, it was quite an interesting exercise. But what that did do, though, is to think about our recruitment strategy and our retention, really, to think about how we now are working differently, working with local schools, with colleges, with universities. We've linked up with Careers Wales as well. So, for example, in the Welsh, the country of Wales, and we were looking at building some of those new relationships in a different way with our graduates and our talent, and putting communications out in different articles and online to encourage people to say, if you live in North Wales, you don't have to be based in Cardiff, for example. We've got an office in Mold. So we were working through different ideas to encourage people to come and work for us, that perhaps, depending on, you know, where they lived and where their office was, that potentially they could, you know, go to a much more local office to them, because it's, you know, public transport can't always be relied on, because it's obviously sometimes quite a long way away from where people live. So I think that was one of the things we were looking at in terms of geography, working with schools and colleges, looking at how we're developing our apprentices pipelines, our talent pipelines, looking at some of the outreach programs, universities and colleges, and getting some better relationships and partnerships and promoting those with others as to be an employer of choice. So working with some of the contact points and some of the schools and colleges as well, in particular, that we've now got in one area. So other than different people having different bits of information and relationships, we've got everything together. So anyone could come in and pick that up and go, right, I can do that. I can talk to all these people all at the same time, tell them what we're doing. We're doing an open day, we're doing some communications, we're doing an engagement session, we're doing some work for apprenticeships and timelines or graduates. And actually some of that's starting to bear fruit, because we've now managed to bring people in from a wider geography, actually, outside of Wales, but also across Wales. So it's been quite exciting and a really good return on that sort of investment, really.
Thank you, Sarah Jane. I can see that Julie Ash wants to come in. I assume that you want to comment on Sarah Jane's response there, Julie?
Yes, thanks, Marion. Yeah, just to say that we've had lots of helpful conversations lately with other organisations about shared office space. So that opens up a lot of opportunities for people having access to local hubs and things like that. So just on a positive note, just to back up what SJ was saying, that we really are looking to spread our wings then, if you like, across Wales. Thank you.
Thank you, Julie. A point well made. And finally, I'll turn to Ruth Glaser.
Diolch, Marion. I think we were just talking about across Wales, and I know later we're going to have our Welsh language report presented to the committee. So I thought it was just worth having a bit of a conversation now about what we are doing to focus on Welsh skills and Welsh language skills amongst our recruitment. And also, I know that this is something that Alistair Neil has raised previously, in that there is a bit of a rumour, maybe perhaps some evidence, that actually the desire for Welsh language skills is making it harder to recruit people or putting people off in terms of recruitment. I personally think that's a bit of a red herring, but it would be good to hear what we're doing about that.
Thank you, Ruth. Well, we're coming to the Welsh language report now as we've rescheduled the agenda. So can I suggest that we hold those points and turn to Laura, and we'll come back to some wider discussion on those specific points and any others that colleagues would like to make. Are you happy with that? Okay, thank you. I can't see any other hands up for comments on those wider workforce challenges. So I'll bring that part of the deep dive to an end. It's been a really helpful discussion, actually, and I think helpful to take assurance that there is a wide range of interventions going on, and which no doubt will feature heavily in the IMTP as we finalise those before it comes to board at the end of March. So diolch am hwnna. Laura, can I turn to you then to provide a summary of the Welsh language report? And as you've just heard, I specifically requested at our last meeting that we receive a report on the Welsh language assessment of job descriptions, and we'll turn back to Sarah Jane on that particular point when you've presented to committee, Laura. Croeso.
Thank you, diolch, Marion. Yeah, so as always, it's a real pleasure for me to share our Welsh language report with the committee, and I'll just briefly highlight some key things in the report. As you quite rightly said, the main update today is relating to the Welsh language assessment for job descriptions, which I'll hand over to SJ for. But in terms of current Welsh language skills, DHW have 40.9% of staff with level 1 to 5 skills, so that's increased since the last period. And the completion of the Welsh language awareness course is now at 90.6%. And just to clarify, some members might have noticed in the More Than Just Words annual report, which is linked within the paper, it shows us as reporting at 25% completion, which obviously is significantly lower than what I'm reporting. So it's just to say this was at the time of the report when the More Than Just Words annual report was being produced back in the summer of 2023. So that's why it's increased significantly now. So since the last meeting, we've successfully appointed a translation manager who started at the beginning of January. And in addition, a translator has been appointed by the business change team. And both of these appointments have really significantly reduced the time and efficiency, and then increased the efficiency of our translation within DHW. So really pleased with that. And then we've also successfully implemented a new telephony system to filter calls to a Welsh-speaking member of staff, in addition to developing and launching an app to improve the assessment of Welsh language skills during recruitment, which I know SJ is going to touch on as well. And just to say that committee members will note that in section 4.7 of the report, one complaint has been received from the Welsh Language Commissioner's Office during the period. And this related specifically to a defective complaints form on our website and then the NHS Wales app login. So a response was submitted to the Commissioner in the required timescales, and I'm just pleased to inform the committee that the Commissioner's office have closed the complaint. So that's quite positive. And that's all really I was going to highlight. So the report does include updates specifically in terms of our Welsh Language Action Plan and the More Than Just Words Action Plan. So I'm happy to take any any questions on those areas of the reports before handing over to SJ to go through the Welsh language recruitment, if that's okay. Thank you.
Thank you, Laura. Any questions or comments specifically on that aspect of Laura's report? There's clearly been some excellent progress, Laura, which is pleasing to see, especially for me as the Welsh Language IM champion, and pleasing to note that the Welsh Language Commissioner has indeed now closed that one complaint that we received. If there aren't any further comments, then I'm going to invite Sarah Jane then to talk to us about the Welsh language assessment. And I know there is a new tool being introduced, which is aimed at aiding the organisation in this respect. Sarah Jane.
Can't get into it, so I'm really sorry, Chair. I'm having a bit of trouble with my technology because I'm on hold at the moment, so I'm just trying to link into it in a second. Bear with me 2 seconds, sorry.
That's fine. Take your time. So I note that the number of Welsh language designated essential posts have increased from 2 in 21-22 to 8 in the current financial year, which is a small increase, which is pleasing to note, but it would be helpful maybe particularly for this committee to understand how the new toolkit might assist in strengthening those numbers and strengthening the opportunity for Welsh speakers within the organisation to be able to use the language. Are we...
Perhaps should we bring, is Shikla able to field some of this answer first, and then perhaps Laura, Chair?
Great, I can see Shikla's put a hand up now. So Shikla, would you like to come in on this point now then?
Yeah, I think the NHS, the app for the Welsh language has been developed by the corporate governance. So we will be working from a job evaluation point of view to make the assessment to see where is desirable, where is essential by utilising the Welsh language assessment app. And we're looking to also make sure we work very closely with the recruiting managers to explain why why the Welsh language skills may be essential using the assessment app. I don't know whether Laura, you may want to come in because obviously the Welsh language app sits within your team to expand a little bit more.
Yeah, it's been quite an exciting development for us because it's part of the wider NHS. So we've working with the Welsh Language Managers group, and we were all trying to talk about how we can make the assessment a lot easier for recruiting managers. So we specifically worked quite closely with Powys to develop the app, and then really grateful for our Office 365 team here at DHEW who've developed the app. So it's really easy. You can use it on your phone or on on the browser. So what happens is now if I was looking to recruit a post, it would automatically be signposted to the assessment app. It gives you the different levels, what we're looking for, and then it gives you the outcome. So it doesn't give the manager the choice necessarily. It sort of mandates what the level needs to be and the reasons why, and then the recruitment teams then can pick that up and advertise. Whereas before, you know, some people might have said, oh, I don't think it's level 3, so I'm going to advertise it as level 1. It's sort of flipped the way round a bit. So we say, no, it has to be level 3, and then they have to come and sort of challenge it a bit that way. So it's been through a lot of testing over the last couple of months since the last committee meeting, and it's now live and being used in DHW, and then it's hopefully now going to be adopted across NHS Wales. So we're all using the same thing across NHS Wales. So yeah, really pleased with it. It's taken a bit of time to get there, but I think it is really positive. So yeah, that's it from my perspective. Thank you.
Thank you, Laura. That's good to hear. Ruth, you've got your hand up.
Yeah, thanks. Thanks, Laura. Thanks, Chick. And do we have obviously that's helpful that it makes it easier for us and more straightforward, and hopefully that means we're able to assess more jobs accurately. But do we have any evidence that externally the request for any level of Welsh language skills proves to be a barrier to recruiting people?
So that's the question. Is that assessment a potential barrier? Sarah Jane, would you like to come in on this point?
Yeah, I think we're doing a lot in this space actually, really, and I think we've still got some analysis to take forward and some benchmark, and I think this is the start of it rather than the end of it, if I'm honest. You know, this is a new piece of technology, and in terms of the app, I think that's incredible. And I think one of the things that I'm really keen on, that it's going to change the hearts and minds, really. So for me, as Laura said, it's going to make people think about things differently and understand that it shouldn't really be a challenge, actually. It should be a given. So I think it will be really helpful to assess this as we move this forward and look at the benchmark, look at the analysis, and actually design that so that we can come back with that understanding. If we find there are things that still need some development and some support, I think, you know, we're doing some transformation in the culture, and this sort of embeds in with that, really, to think about how do we, you know, there's a lot of things within culture. We could probably talk about culture for another hour and a half. I could, because I'm really, you know, excited about that. But actually, this is part of it. Actually, it's about thinking about things differently rather than trying to challenge. It's more about saying this is a good thing to have. Why shouldn't we? You know, and actually, you know, move that mindset
so
into a
SJ,
different place,
I
really.
I understand all of that. Sorry to stop you, but that's not my question. My question is to the outside world, when we're advertising roles, does having a Welsh language requirement prove to be a barrier to attracting candidates? Because I think that's the question that Alistair was challenging us on. Because he had heard some you know, some stories that perhaps it was a barrier.
But perhaps we can look at the evidence in terms of the number of posts that have been filled, which are considerable. I can see that Claire's hand is up, as well as Shikla. Who wants to come first? And perhaps Sarah Jane, you can come back at the end if need be. Claire?
So I think it's a really good question, actually. And we go to LinkedIn. If you look at our LinkedIn profile, we advertise both in Welsh and in English. And actually, it would be good to see the response rates for those adverts to gauge a sense as to is it a factor or not? And because I don't think we can really answer that question, if I'm honest with you, Ruth, given what we've got now. So I think it's a good one, and given that we now have a more dispersed, as we mentioned before, and a more remote working opportunities, and we want to encourage, you know, geographical spread across Wales, whether there is an implication. So I think that's something we need to take away, if I'm honest, Sarah Jane and Shikla, and actually looking at, we've got the facility because we do actively promote on LinkedIn, for example, and we can look at the response rates for both an English and Welsh advert and see if that's one mechanism. I'm sure there's more that we could get a gauge for appetite, I suppose, with our
So that's a really
recruitment.
good. That's a good measure, Claire. Actually, another organisation I work with does the same, posts in English and in Welsh. And on Welsh language LinkedIn, we get a lot more engagement than we do with the English language stuff we put out. So it is a good test, I think.
Thank you. Let me bring Marilyn in, and then Shikra, if I may. Marilyn.
Yeah, good morning. Very similar to what people have already said. I think that, like Claire said, I don't think it's an internal thing that we can really answer. I think we need external verification, really, of what people think the position is. I think LinkedIn is a good one, but perhaps we could just try some just wider feedback if possible. I'm not exactly sure what at this present time, but for us to explore that, because also as well, some people's perception is not the reality. So and I totally agree with you, Marion, it should be in there. And what Sarah Jane said, we're in Wales and it should be something. But I think sometimes it gets misinterpreted that you've got to be a fluent Welsh speaker, for instance. So I think the messaging is really important. So I think that's something for us to consider going forward, really, about how we can see externally the effects and to make sure that how we've messaged it is correct and is more inclusive than off-putting. So.
Thank you, Marilyn. I'll turn to Shikha now, please.
Yeah, just a quick anecdotal, really. So for me, within the Welsh citizens, I think it's expected that we would see Welsh desirable or Welsh essential. However, based on my experience dealing with some of the potential candidates outside of Wales, they do ask the question, even if we put it down as Welsh desirable, do we need to learn Welsh? Do we need to speak Welsh? And that ranges from different levels of roles in seniority as well as junior roles. So outside of Wales, there is, we just need to work a little bit harder. So when candidates do contact, we usually explain that, you know, there is an option to learn Welsh if that's what you want to do. But if it's desirable, then, you know, we will gladly accept your application and support you. So I think there is a little bit of a misunderstanding in terms of when we put Welsh desirable, that people often interpret that as essential.
Thank you, Shikha. And finally then, Julie. Sorry, I think you're on mute, Julie. Do you have an additional point you want to make?
Yeah, I do. Sorry about that.
Thank
Chair.
you.
I agree with the points already raised, but I'd like to add to that, take it a step further in terms of once we've collected and understood that qualitative and quantitative evidence around this, that we potentially look then to update our recruitment approach and processes where appropriate. So get that evidence and then utilize that in terms of the way that we are targeting or approaching our recruitment with regards to the Welsh language. Does that make sense?
Thank you, Julie. I'm going to bring this discussion to a close now, unless Sarah Jane wants to add anything more. I think we've had a fairly full and rich discussion. Perhaps just to remind colleagues of the legislation around the Welsh language, and that it is clearly set out in legislation that we treat that we should not be treating the Welsh and English language less favourably. So I think that's part of the mix as well. And I'm sure Chris will have something to add on that particular point as well. Chris?
Diolch, Marion. Yeah, it was just to say, obviously, we're scheduled to come within the Wellbeing and Future Generations Act from April. Welsh language a critical element of that. And also, as a board, you know, we are committed to being a bilingual organisation. We've got a bilingual skills strategy that underpins that. So there's something for me about anecdote. I think I want to be very cautious when we talk about anecdotal opinions around the Welsh language. I think we do need to look at what, as a board, we've committed to do strategically from a Welsh language perspective and what the legislation tells us.
Thank you, Chris, for that clarification. You know, we do have that bilingual skills strategy, and it'll be very interesting to see as we progress the impact of the actions arising from that strategy. And finally then to you, Sarah Jane.
Thank you, Chair. Just a final note, really, to say this is a commitment within our IMTP under Mission 5, and Claire is our Mission 5 leader. So I think it is really important that, you know, that there's been a lot of stuff done this year, 23-24, but actually for 24-25, it would be helpful in terms of shaping some of that. And this covers quite a lot of our portfolios, actually. It's not just in the people in OD space, it's across all of our portfolios, as Chris has said. It's a strategic driver. It would be good if we could receive, perhaps through myself or Claire, just, you know, are there things that we need to perhaps drive and focus on better to support us with our strategic endeavours, because we want to make sure that that's in Mission 5, it's in our driver for Welsh language, and we've got it there to commit to. So it may be already, but as a bit of a check and challenge, I'm just opening it up to say at any point between now and the end of this financial year, contact either Chris or Claire or myself, and we'll make sure that that is featured within our Mission 5 strategic drivers for the IMTP. Thank you.
Thank you, Sarah Jane, and thank you for attending the committee this morning. We are being asked to note the Welsh Language Report and the update on the progress made on the Welsh Language Assessment for job descriptions for assurance. It's been a rich and interesting discussion, and thank you again for your contributions. So we'll now revert back to the substantive agenda, and we'll go back to part 4 and item 4.1, which is the Internal Audit Progress Report. And it's my pleasure now then to hand over to Stephen Cheney from Internal Audit to present the progress report. And in doing so, Stephen, perhaps I could ask you to also cover the current status of the iCare digitisation audit, which this committee requested back at our October meeting. Colleagues will recall, I'm sure, that this is the programme that transferred over from Cardiff and the Vale Health Board last summer. So, Stephen, I'll hand over to you. Diolch yn fawr.
Thank you very much, Chair, and good morning, everyone. Just to note, I have asked Martin to come along for item 4.2 as well, so I'll pick that up when we move on onto the report. But for the progress report, a couple of things I'd like to mention. We're progressing well. We've moved forward on a couple of pieces of further work since the papers have been issued, so we're not anticipating any problems close off the remaining audits. I have actually written quite a number of paragraphs relating to the iCare services, so I shall keep it brief. Just to say that yes, we previously requested to pick up some work regarding the transfer of the iCare services. Additionally, we have also been asked to pick up some further work regarding the iCare services, and particularly around more specific elements of the transfer. Both pieces of work, in effect, because they will be two separate pieces of work now, will be delivered to the same time frame. We now have very good engagement at a senior level on the iCare services. We're working to a very tight deadline to complete the work, two interim deadlines, end of February and the third week of March, and don't foresee an issue with that. We've as I said, we've engaged at a senior level, both internally of Insured Services, to access the required information, and there are no remaining challenges there. To sort of expedite the work, we've split up the assignment between two additional auditors. So one auditor who was originally working on it is working on one aspect, and we've brought in additional auditor who was very familiar with DHCW to complete the other piece of work as well. So we're fully resourced, we're on track, we have very good engagement now. There's a lot of interest within the review, which is what has prompted the level of engagement. So we're committed to delivering against that deadline. Do not foresee any issues with that. Probably the most notable impact would be that the second auditor that is now engaged with the delivery of iCare services, he was due to commence the data quality audit, so that one is paused temporarily, but it's more of a rearrangement rather than a delay overall. But otherwise, everything else should be on track for that. It's been a most interesting piece of work.
Thank you, Stephen, for that clarification. And we are being asked to receive the internal audit progress report. And perhaps you could take us through the specific internal audit review on benefits realisation. And we'll take questions at the end. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I've got a sort of high-level overview, and Martin will welcome any additional questions or detail required, but I'm hoping this will provide a good summary of what we completed. So we undertook an assessment really of the benefits realisation framework that's in place within DHCW. Found it to be very comprehensive. It defines benefits, how they will be released, talks about the benefits register, records and tracks expected benefits, and it sets out a realisation plan as well, which captures the necessary aspects of delivering meaningful benefits. So very happy with the overall frame that's in place. However, some of the common themes coming out within the recommendations relate to the framework not being used or utilised to its full potential. So, for example, benefits toolkit is not in use. Not all benefits had owners attributed, and there was no evidence of identifying criteria for measuring the realisation of benefits. The benefits team itself doesn't at this time have a mechanism to collect or collate the data produced by the projects and programs. A lot of this is captured within the health boards and trusts throughout Wales. And likewise, as benefits are not tracked, disbenefits are also not tracked. And disbenefit is a measurable decline resulting from an outcome perceived as negative. So quite literally the opposite of a benefit. And finally, the reporting of benefits and activity. There is reporting taking place within programme structure and the projects themselves. But we've raised recommendation over further or extended reporting to support that. So certainly a very good framework in place, just a number of areas to maximise the benefit of that. And I think that's a general summary of what we looked at. Martin, was there anything else to add to it, if I may?
No, I think you covered it. I think it's probably worth just noting that in terms of the realisation, it is harder for DHCW to do that aspect because the benefits of your digital solutions tend to be felt or achieved within health boards and trusts. So you need to get that information fed back into yourselves to be able to collate, and that sometimes could be tricky. But yeah, no, overall the framework's really good. It's just the realisation needs to be fleshed out more.
Thank you.
Thank you, and thank you, Stephen. So clearly, work is ongoing to develop a process to collate benefits, and I'm going to turn now then to Mark, who might want to respond to the audit we've just heard about.
Yeah,
Mark.
just thank you very much, Chair. Just to say, it was a really good process in terms of a learning opportunity, I think, for DHCW as well. Claire's often said we've got a Ferrari in the garage and just haven't driven it, and I think that sort of underlines Claire's point. So there's a lot of comms in terms of the action plan, and in particular in terms of revitalising the benefits framework. One area which I think just underpins the comment there: if you build it, they not necessarily will come. So we could build in terms of one of the recommendations regarding the SharePoint site. We're probably going to look at a different solution, which will encourage the users to actually engage with the repository. So it might not be SharePoint. So I'd just like to highlight that now. We might have a better sort of technical solution, and also the support from the Digital Change Network will be key, because fundamentally, if it's a lot of work to try and get those measures and get that input, then we won't get that level of engagement. So some of the developments and the particular automation of capturing ones used in many times is critical, and that's part of the action plan we've got in place.
Thank you, Mark. And I'm now going to turn to Claire for a last comment in response to the audit in question. Claire.
Yeah, a great audit again from internal audit, and it's one of those you just went, oh, yuck, and hence the Ferrari comment. I think what I'm heartened with is now we have a programme oversight board. We will drive the visibility of the variation where there's programs where you have got a good benefits framework and adoption, and those where there's an opportunity to demonstrate that. And for some, it's easier than others, because some have got quite a detailed business case and a good groundwork and foundations to move on. With others, it's something that we need to develop together. But I would echo Martin's the importance of collaboration across NHS Wales, and our role to highlight that variation at a senior level is also, I think, important, given the context of the shortfall in funding and the priority digital should have, because the value it brings, and that's demonstrated by those benefits realisation statements. So great report. If I'm honest, slightly disappointing in terms of where we were with it. But as Mark has already alluded to, I think we now have the opportunity. Now we have the programmes under our belt almost, is to drive that adoption and variation across the programmes and ownership, really. So I look forward to seeing that develop as we roll out the Ferrari from the garage. Thank you.
Thank you, Claire. And finally, Chris Daly.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, I just wanted to quickly put on record my thanks to Stephen for taking on the iCare work, and a few changes as we've gone along from the last committee to this one, but he's kept us updated all the way through, which has been really helpful. I know, Marion, you've been chasing for updates on this as well, so that's been fed back to Steve, and we've had a great response in terms of taking on the work and looking at the scope. And just on the benefits report, I think it might be worth referring this one to the new Programmes Delivery Committee. We had a development session a month or so ago, and benefits was a key aspect Mark came along and presented there, so it might be worth them having sight of this audit report as well, Chair.
That's a really constructive suggestion, Chris, and we'll take that forward as an action then. And can I add my thanks to Stephen? We met with my audit committee lay members a few days ago for our annual meeting, and we had a very open and honest conversation. And I think this is an excellent report, which we are being asked to note for assurance, noting with pleasure the reasonable assurance awarded to this report. Diolch yn fawr, Stephen. I'm going to bring that discussion to a close then, if I may, and turn us to the Audit Wales Committee update. And I'm going to invite Nathan Couch now to present this update, which we are being asked to note for assurance. Nathan.
Thank you, Chair, and good morning, everyone. So the progress report provides the Audit and Assurance Committee with an update on our current and planned accounts and performance audit work at DHCW. It also provides additional information on other relevant examinations and studies published by the Auditor General and relevant corporate documents published by Audit Wales. So taking the accounts update first, then this is fairly brief. So just to say that the planning and risk assessment for the audit of the 2023-24 financial statements is in progress, and our detailed planning work and interim testing will commence in March 2024. I'll just bring in Mike at this point to see if he wants to add anything to that.
Yeah, thanks, Nathan. Good morning, everybody. We've got a brief update on the accounts broad timetable there, but I note there's a separate agenda item covering off most of that, item 5.72. So I was proposing just to pick that up as part of that agenda item, Chair, if that's okay.
Great, thanks. That's good.
Thank you.
Thanks, Mike. In terms of our performance audit work then, so our core structured assessment, annual audit and workforce planning reports are finalised and are in today's committee papers. Moving on then to the deep dive work. So given the challenging financial position across NHS Wales, we've decided to delay our deep dive into to examine digital arrangements. We'll now review the approaches NHS bodies are taking to achieve cost improvements, efficiencies and financial sustainability. We'll be contacting DHCW colleagues imminently to arrange a set-up meeting for this particular piece of work, and our review of digital arrangements will then be completed later in the year. And our local review focusing on stakeholder engagement arrangements is currently in the scoping stage. In terms of the relevant examinations and additional information, then exhibits 3 and 4 in the update provide links to those published by the Auditor General, any additional information published by Audit Wales since the last committee update. And that's it for the update paper. Happy to take any questions.
Thank you, Nathan. That's really helpful. I can't see any hands up, so I propose that we note the Audit Wales Committee update, and shall we move on then to the structured assessment report, agenda item 4.4. And Nathan, this is yours again, which includes very helpfully the responses made by DHCW to the report. And I should just say that I'm very grateful to Audit Wales for this report, which is overall very positive, in addition to outlining some of the key recommendations that we will now take forward. But I'll hand over to you to introduce the structured assessment before us today. Nathan.
Thank you, Chair. So our annual structured assessment work examines DHCW's corporate arrangements relating to governance, systems of assurance, planning and financial management. This year, we've streamlined the approach by not covering use of resources, which traditionally focuses on workforce, digital and estates. The approach going forward will be to cover these areas alongside other aspects of the organisation's arrangements as part of separate in-depth reviews. The report has been taken through the usual clearance process where DHCW colleagues were able to comment on its factual accuracy, tone and balance. I'll just quickly take you through then the key conclusions for each of the areas we reviewed. So overall, we found DHCW's corporate governance, assurance, planning and financial arrangements are generally good, with some opportunities to strengthen them further. However, DHCW is facing significant resource, financial and investment risks that will need to be carefully managed to ensure it achieves both immediate priorities and longer-term objectives while remaining financially sustainable. Underpinning that conclusion, then, we found that DHCW is a stable and cohesive board that conducts its business appropriately, effectively and transparently. However, opportunities remain to enhance some arrangements further. DHCW systems of assurance are robust and operating effectively, but opportunities exist to enhance some of those arrangements further. In terms of planning, DHCW's planning arrangements continue to mature, but opportunities remain to develop detailed support in delivery plans for some corporate plans and strategies to support effective monitoring and oversight. And DHCW is facing significant resource and investment risks, which may impact on the delivery of its key strategic and transformational priorities. In terms of managing financial resources, DHCW met its financial objectives for 22-23 and is forecasting a break-even position for 23-24. However, there are uncertainties around its financial position in future years. We did make some recommendations, 5 recommendations in total, all of which were agreed by management and with appropriate actions and implementation dates. And finally, I'd just like to pass on my thanks to Chris, Laura, the corporate governance team, and wider DHCW colleagues for their continuing support with the review. Happy to take any questions.
Thank you very much, Nathan. That's really helpful. I'm going to take a question from Ruth, and I'm sure Claire perhaps might want to respond before we finish this discussion. Ruth.
Diolch, Marion. Two comments. Thank you for the report and thank you for including the organisational response as well. In the papers, I think it's very thorough and it's always very helpful to receive these. Because you would expect there to be things that we can improve on, and we want there to be things we can improve on, and we want to know what they are. So thank you for that. Two comments. One around our financial position. I always get, slightly on my own behalf, but also slightly on Claire's behalf, quite sensitive when the risks to us caused by our financial position get called out, and if that's called out in a way which implies that it is within our control, I get quite sensitive about that. So I think it's helpful here that it's recognised that a lot of this is out with our control, so we cannot do anything about the wider environment we're operating in. But actually, I get a lot of assurance from the fact we are doing everything that is within our power to be able to operate in a sustainable way within the envelope and within the constraints that we've got. And we'll continue to make representations where we need to around how we move to a more sustainable funding position. So I think it's helpful that we can use this information to make sure we're all giving the same message around that. And then the second point, I think within the shared learning and listening section, I think we just missed an opportunity to say that one of the things that would strengthen our shared listening and learning is getting some of those presentations in the Welsh language, because that then actually covers a much wider range of the citizens that we support. We have had a separate discussion about the shared learning and listening presentations and how we might use those going forwards to better challenge us as an organisation and to better hear directly from citizens. It can be quite difficult sometimes for us, I think, as a digital organisation to say very clearly what is it that we do that impacts upon the citizens. Really, the first things that we're doing that are going into the hands of the citizens probably come through the NHS app. Up until then, most of our customers, inverted commas, have been the medical professionals who work within the NHS, and those staff who work within the NHS. So I think we're moving into a new phase for DHCW, and we need to bulk up what we're doing in terms of our direct citizen-facing engagement for us as a board to be able to properly listen and learn to the citizens of Wales. So that's something that I think we can expect, probably us as a wider board, certainly something the IMs are very interested in, making sure that we make the most out of that. Thank you.
Thank you, Diolch Ruth, and that is certainly something that I will escalate to board in my highlight report. Claire, would you like to respond in terms of the 5 recommendations more generally, and perhaps that one point about the over-reliance on vacancy savings to achieve our overall savings target is something we have discussed before. It is still a challenge for us. So perhaps you'd like to comment on the work that we're doing to design an operating model that will enable, sort of continuous and recurrent savings in this vein.
Yeah, so my hairs did go up on end, Ruth, when I read it originally, because I do care passionately about balancing my books, obviously, because I'm the finance director. So firstly, thank you for your report, and all the work that you've done to pull this together. It was taken very seriously by the exec team and our weekly execs, and also shared at our management board. And inevitably, the main topic of conversation obviously stemmed around a bit of reflection. Do we only pull the one lever in our vacancy factor, and is that dominating? Yes, financially it does dominate it, but actually we do have a quite a robust savings plan that actually proactively look not only at our employment costs, but our estates and other aspects, and we were proactive in reducing our estates in order to maintain recurrent plans. And also, given our digital nature and our expertise, we've contributed quite significantly this year in looking at our VAT and our VAT recovery and optimization. Having said all of that, the point of it really is it's very short term in nature. And how do we maintain the longer term financial sustainability of DHEW? And it was a point that you raised earlier, actually, in terms of having long-term workforce plans that implement our new operating model. So on reflection, I think it is true to say that we have a high vacancy factor in amongst our savings plan. That is true. But as an organisation, we are very focused on supporting the NHS challenge, but also creating value for money. So as an exec team, we are now putting together the pieces of what the transition to a product-based cloud operating model and resource plan would look like, to put the details into that roadmap, which would help translate what the need of the organisation would be going forward to operate in an efficient and effective way in the digital space. There is another side to it, though, which is all about the funding. Yeah, so we have quite a complex funding model, and since we've transitioned as an organisation to a special health authority, that funding model has reflected the need for a board, but has been dominated by the growth in the Digital Priority Investment Fund. So the other part of that equation is defining our requirement and our fit in the system and the funding necessary to make that work. So whilst I agree as an organisation, we need to ensure we create value for money and develop the right products in the most efficient way to service and generate the benefits that the needs for the NHS. But equally, I think it's so important to recognise that we have a very complex funding current arrangement, and also we need to look at that side of the equation to ensure that we can sustain a workforce model that is more longer term, more efficient, given the short-term nature of some of the programs, but equally fits with a product-based delivery for cloud. So that is quite a long-winded answer, and apologies, but it is a complex question to answer, and just formulating a sustainable funding model needs us to do that homework first. And the other piece of work I want to highlight is we're not looking at this in isolation. So together with HFMA and Mark, we've put quite a lot of work in to say, and where do we sit? How does Wales and the digital funding model sit in relation to others? And it's benchmarking, isn't it? Are we doing this well, or are we not? And we are looking at that, and that will complement the piece of work that we're doing. And the other bit to mention is we are very programme and digital development orientated. So together with the new programme board, we're looking, as I already alluded to, in how do we, now we have more governance and oversight of those programmes, how do we use that position to have a more efficient programme delivery model that may require us to take a risk on some workforce requirements in order to be a more efficient and effective delivery of those programs, and it's a fine balance. So I welcome the report. It did create such an interesting discussion for us as an exec team, but it's that has really led me to think we need to have a transformational programme that lays out the roadmap to delivery, which informs the workforce strategy and the funding requirement and the efficiencies that we need to drive through DHEW. And I look forward in subsequent boards once that programme is defined more detailedly to share that with you, which this report's helped really to stimulate that thought and that outcome. So thank you, Chair.
Yeah, Claire, and I think you've summed up very well the executive team's response and the challenge ahead in terms of producing that transformational roadmap. And certainly the structured assessment for 2023 is extremely helpful in that regard. I think it brings together a number of key challenges, recommendations and responses from DHCW. Thank you, colleagues, for your engagement on that. And the committee is being asked to note for assurance that report. Moving on quickly then, conscious of the time, to agenda item 4.6, and that brings us to the annual audit report. And I'll now invite Dave Thomas to present the Audit Wales audit report for assurance. Thank you, Dave.
Diolch, Marion. Good morning all. Nice to be at the committee this morning. So I'm going to keep this short because in essence, the annual audit report is a summary of all the audits the Auditor General has done at the SHA over the last 12 months. And you've had several of those on your agenda item this morning. So it summarises what we found from the last set of accounts audits and obviously our performance audit work as well. On the accounts audit, paragraphs 12 to 17 tell you everything you need to know about that work that was undertaken last summer, particularly in relation to the opinion that the Auditor General gave on the accounts. On the performance audit work, you've heard from Nathan this morning on structured assessments, and you've also heard from David on the workforce planning. The annual audit report also includes a summary of what we found earlier on in the year when we did the work on the governance arrangements for the GMS Programme Board. Chair, as all reports the Audit Committee has received before, the annual audit report is in essence a formality, really, which can go to board for noting. So I don't intend to go through the message slavishly. Just some interesting appendices on the back, which updates on some of the things Nathan was talking about in terms of the work in progress, and the welcome assurance that the fee we set out in the order plan early on this year is the fee we'll be charging to the Health Board. So I'm conscious of the clock. I'm conscious you've seen a lot of the work already, Chair. I'm going to stop there, but I'd be happy to take any questions on the report if you had any.
Thank you, Dave, and it is a pleasure to see you back joining us here at the Audit Committee. Can I ask one question specifically to you, Dave? We've received the structured assessment for 2023. You've highlighted a number of the audit reports that have been conducted during the course of the year. Clear reference there to the importance of benchmarking. You know, where does DHCW sit in terms of the digital space? But perhaps a question for you in terms of benchmarking more widely. How do you see DHCW performing within the wider NHS family? You know, we're coming up to 3 years since our formation, and it would be just helpful to hear your insights and assessment of where we are.
I think the structured assessment probably says it all in terms of the arrangements work, you know, and I think we've always delivered very positive structured assessment work, and I think you can take a lot of positive assurance from that. I think some of the discussions earlier on today do probably just sort of set the scene a little bit for the challenges which come ahead, which lie ahead, particularly as the HW takes on these additional programs and the SRO arrangements for that, the workforce and the technical sort of challenges that come with that. So I think it's stabilized, it's established itself really well from scratch. But I think there are some interesting challenges ahead, actually, and the deeper dive which Nathan referred to in terms of our digital transformation thematic, which will come a little bit later on this year, that'll have to be tailored for DHCW, and I'll be looking forward to sort of to Nathan and myself and others speaking to the SHA to see how we can do that to probably answer the question you just posed in a little bit more detail, Marion, potentially, because I was really interested to hear some of the benchmarking stuff Claire said she was doing, because we can so say how you compare corporately to other bodies in Wales. We haven't got another DHCW in Wales we can compare you to. So it's a question of, what benchmarks we can maybe get your help on using as well. But in overall terms, I think the Special Health Act can take a lot of assurance in terms of what we said to you. The key thing is how you sort of take forward that system leadership role, and you know what the other bits of the NHS in Wales think about you and the products DHW produces. So, and that is why we've got a piece of work on stakeholder engagement in our program as well. So there might be some useful stuff to feed back in there as well. But thus far, as you'll recall from everything we said to you so far since your inception, it's been pretty positive.
Thank you, Dave. That's very helpful, and I'm sure we all look forward to that deep dive later in the year. And thank you for your attendance this morning. That brings us nicely then to agenda item 4.7, which is the audit action log. And I'm going to ask Laura now to update the committee on the current status of the audit action log. Laura.
Diolch, Marion. So hopefully this should be fairly quick. So it's the routine audit action log report. And just to know, as the committee are aware, So following advice from internal audit, one action dependent on a third party is being managed via a separate log for tracking. So that's not included in this report. So there were 25 actions reviewed at the last committee meeting, and 20 of which then were closed, which left a total of 5 open actions. The committee received 5 reports at the last meeting, which contained a total of 27 new actions. So all of these have been added to the log, which now contains a total of 32 open actions. 13 of these will be reviewed in the private session due to their content. So from these actions, 19 are considered complete, and then the remaining 13 are on target for completion by their target date. So very much on track, and my thanks to all of the lead action owners, because I constantly ask them for updates. So I'm really grateful that they do update them so I can provide the accurate summary to the committee. But that's all I wanted to highlight, and happy to take any questions on the public actions if needed.
Diolch, Laura. Thank you. That's a very clear update, noting in the changes in the status of those actions since our last meeting, and I'm grateful to you. Good progress, clearly, and that's positive to note. Claire.
I just noted, Stephen, in your internal audit action, there is 5 audits that are work in progress. So it's the calm before the storm. So I just wanted to whet your appetite in that we would anticipate there'd be, well, hopefully the audits will all be good anyway, but the actions coming out of those audits will impact on the action logs going forward. So this is good grounding work, but I suspect that those numbers will go up as those audits are completed, and just to anticipate that.
Thank you, Claire. Stephen?
Thank you. Also seemed a good opportunity to mention that one of the reviews that we've yet to complete is actually around the recommendation tracker. It's a follow-up of, well, it's not specifically a recommendation tracker, it's a follow-up of significant recommendations that have been raised previously. So the tracker will form a core component of that. So we will be providing assurance over the management of those actions in effect as well, albeit it'll be from individual audits completed over the last couple of years or so. So yes, you should be getting some assurance there as well, hopefully.
Thank you, Stephen, and thank you, Claire. So plenty to be getting on, and looking forward to at our next audit committee meeting in April then. Diolch yn fawr. So we note the progress of the audit action log, which brings me nicely to the last agenda item in part 4 of today's committee meeting. And this is agenda item 4.8, the local counter fraud update report. And now it's my pleasure to invite Henry Bales to draw out the highlights from that update report, specifically for quarter 3. Henry, bore da.
Thank you, Chair. As I said, I'll try and keep it brief. I think on the whole, as read by the members here today, it covers our work in the quarter 3 financial period. I will jump ahead slightly into the report as there's a gap in the data for the e-learning figures, as they weren't available when we produced the report. I do hope they're correct this time, because there were some issues last time with them being accurate. I have gone to shared services and asked, so hopefully it's been rectified. They've told me that there are 33 members of staff that have completed it in year to date, and taken into account some that's happened beforehand, which works out to be just under 3% of the total amount of staff that are in DHCW. Across NHS Wales as a whole, in the year to date, the organisations are showing around a 7.5 to 8% completion. That is skewed up quite significantly by 3 organisations who have made it mandatory, and they do have quite a significant number of members of staff doing it. And there is also a all-time figure for them since the training was first created in 2015, which shows that a number of those organisations where it's mandatory are pretty much at 100% completion moving forward. Is a little bit dubious because there is no end date to it. Once it's done, it is done, and people will have been and left. But that is there. And although it could seem low in terms of the number of staff doing it for DHCW, I think it's important to note the fact that there are a lot of other areas of fraud awareness that we do, which brings in that it is there. For example, corporate inductions, where we've done 2 this quarter. Over the past year and a half, which is what I've got data for, we've presented to approximately 300 members of staff, and we are in that program to move forward. So when someone new comes in, we will be there. And we also have done 2 10 talks to approximately 200-ish people in that time for more specific areas. So I think we do have a good overall fraud awareness. It's just that specific metric looks a little bit low compared to the rest. We also had Fraud Awareness Week in the time period where we produced 6 ways for digital awareness and putting it out there for fraud, which were distributed. And if you are interested to have a look, you can see them on our SharePoint page. In the period, there was 1 fraud prevention notice in relation to mandate fraud, and the support material was cascaded to the finance teams, which is mainly focused in the shared services for change of bank details. Obviously, we've completed 1 fraud risk assessment in the credit card fraud, which is provided in the private meeting, but found that the systems in place were very robust and no real recommendations were provided. The National Fraud Initiative in there was 1 that was shown as left to be completed. That is now completely done and gone. And we've had 1 fraud referral in relation to downloading of software against policy. More detail in the private audit committee, and that referral has gone into 1 investigation, but covered more later. If there are any questions, I'm happy to take them. But,
Thank you, Henry. That's very helpful, and thank you for highlighting the issue with the data in terms of the e-learning training. I can see that Ruth has got a hand up, and then Mark.
Thanks, Marion. Thanks, Henry. That was a really helpful update, and I always like it that we spend more time in prevention, because that's where we can actually do the work and help inform our staff of the correct processes to be used. I was just wondering, is there anything else we can do as an organisation around payroll? I just think at the moment we're moving potentially into an environment, we've already spoken about it today, that we're taking on more digital programs from across the system. With that can often come the transferring of staff from one part of the NHS into us, and we know that may then throw up payroll errors. Obviously the majority of those get resolved and come to light very quickly, but that does provide more of an opportunity for people who may wish to try to get some additional money, potentially getting paid twice or whatever it is. Is there anything more that as an organisation we should or could be doing if we're thinking about the fact that we're probably going to be doing more of those types of transfers of people in the future?
Yeah, I think obviously there's the new overpayments dashboard that they're going through to try and help reduce the number of overpayments happening. All I would say is something that I would advocate when someone comes in, but it falls more down to the people who are onboarding onto ESR, is that they can run a check for an inter-authority transfer to move the person's ESR records when they've previously been employed, and that should indicate if they're currently still showing as live on the ESR, and if that is checked before they are onboarded, it would stop them being double paid, because they will be notified that they're currently showing active with another organisation. Forgive me, I can't recall if that is done with shared services or whether that is done locally.
Perhaps we could just get that confirmed back to the committee separately, that's part of our process, either with shared services or with us. That'd be really helpful. Thank you.
Perhaps we can take that offline. And Henry, thank you for your response. And Mark.
Thanks, Chair, and thanks, Ruth. Really, you just touched upon my point really regarding salary overpayments and some of the work that's happened since the last audit committee, whereby basically finance is under the finance domain in terms of managing the risk of salary overpayments, and there's been a number of controls put in place, not least of which is raising the risk on Datix to enable us to manage the salary overpayments, and we are liaising with counter fraud and shared services in terms of controls from that perspective. So I just wanted to highlight that, particularly Henry, because there have been discussions with Mr. Lavington as well since the last audit committee. One question I do have, and we'll probably have to take this offline, is the 3 organisations which have been really, really successful in terms of the training that who mandated it. Would there be any sort of opportunity to liaise with them in terms of best practice, how they have managed to sort of achieve that level of compliance, and maybe bring back into DHEW?
Thank you, Mark. And you're picking up the final question, which I was going to raise in terms of where are we in terms of our discussions, the mandatory status of our e-learning. And maybe that's something we can come back to, unless there are any quick answers today. Claire or Paul, is that a point you'd like to respond to before I bring this to a close? Claire.
Yeah, so just quickly, we've sent out comms via the internet recently. Sian is our cyber chief in leading this one. So we've tried to set ourselves a target of, it is mandatory in DHEW. The problem we've got is seeing it on ESR in a mandatory field, because it's not a corporate mandatory e-learning within ESR. Unfortunately, you have to go and find it. So through the directorate structure, we are keen to get much better than 3%. That's shocking, frankly. So it's really about how do we drive that up through the directorate structure to get to a much higher compliance rate. And we set ourselves 100% by the end of March, which is, given where we are now, that's only 6 weeks away. So that's quite a significant challenge. I think it's more likely we'll get halfway there, if I'm honest, but there is certainly an internal comms drive to really shake up and get the compliance rates to where they be, and I'll certainly take the next step to raise awareness around the management board later this week to reinforce that message to the team and to the staff. It is, and usually you have to have directions on how to find it within ESR, which aren't difficult, but it is an extra step, which I think might be where we're falling down, but we'll correct that through internal comms.
Thank you, Claire. That's really helpful. And Paul, finally.
Thank you, Chair. Claire, as you know, I'm a little bit OCD about starting a mandatory training within my team. And this week, my percentage compliance dropped considerably. And when I looked into it, it's because the fraud awareness training has been mandated. So this week, 6 of my team have completed it. So it is appearing now on the competency list on the SR. So it is easy to access. And as I said, my team are working through it. So I'm sure others are too.
Great news.
Thank you for that comment, Paul, and thank you, Henry, for joining us this morning to present the counter fraud update, which we are noting. Diolch yn fawr, and that brings us nicely to the end of part 4 of today's committee meeting. We've got a comfort break now of 15 minutes, so it'll be just under 15 minutes. So if we could please come back by 11:25, that would be great. We look forward to seeing you then. Diolch yn fawr, and thank you, colleagues who are leaving us. It's been a very helpful and constructive discussion to date, and grateful for your engagement as ever. Diolch yn fawr. Croeso nôl gyfeillion, welcome back, colleagues, to part 5 of today's agenda, which deals with the governance. Noting, of course, that we've already dealt with 2 agenda items in this part of the committee, i.e. 5.4 and 5. So I think we're making good progress overall. So I'm now going to open this part of the committee by inviting Paul Evans, who's Head of Quality and Regulatory, to present the Compliance and Cyber Resilience Unit Update Report. And I understand you'll be presenting some slides on the annual quality plan proposed for 24-25, Paul. You're very welcome. Diolch yn fawr.
Diolch, Chair. Yes, I'll start off with some key points from the usual quarterly report, and then I'll share my screen with the slides from the annual plan, if that's okay. Just one thing to note at the start of the quarterly report, the Cyber Resilience Unit has now moved to another directorate, so this will be the last time I'll present information on the Cyber Resilience Unit activity. So as usual, I've split the report into key points. So I'll start off with audit. Our risk-based internal audit programme continues to operate effectively. At the end of Q3, the programme is 100% compliant with our plan. There have been 3 external audits in Q3, all were successful. We've had a new certification to ISO 3415 and surveillance visits for British Standard 76000 and the Service Desk Institute. All findings from those audits have been logged onto iPassport and been addressed by relevant teams. And additionally, there are 3 planned audits in Q4. ISO 9001 and 14001 surveillance visit, which is actually underway currently. And hot off the press, I can report at the end of day 1, there are no findings on either standard so far. That's 1 day down, 5 to go. And there's also a surveillance visit scheduled for British Standard 10008. Moving on to the quality management system, the team are continuing to work with document owners to increase the percentage of documents within due date for review, and we are seeing some significant improvements there. And I think this will be further supported by the work on the document management strategy, which was approved by execs last month and then presented at management board on Thursday this week. There's also a number of policies working their way through the approval process and under the guidance of our corporate governance colleagues. And additionally, all audit non-compliance is now both internal and external are being managed through iPassport. We've seen some reduction in compliance with the initial migration back in October, but I'm pleased to report there's been significant progress on outstanding non-compliances, particularly from people and OD colleagues. So a big thank you to Shikla for the work that's gone on there. And the feedback we're having on the use of iPassport to manage these non-compliances so far has been extremely positive. Moving on to some more legislative requirements, the Cyber Resilience Unit has undertaken 5 audits under the NIS regulations, with reports being issued to the OESs and Welsh Government as competent authority, and again positive feedback has been received from each of the OESs on the audit process. CIO have also implemented a new automated process for incident reporting under NIS to try and make it a little bit more streamlined and efficient. There were 3 incidents reported in the quarter, only one of which was deemed to be reportable under NIS regulations, and the CIO are working through that with the OES currently. Medical device regulations have seen another delay from Westminster Government and the MHRA, so the new implementation date for the updated UK medical device regulations is now moved to 2025. So the team are now focusing on ensuring we're complying with the current UK regs, which don't really mention software extensively, but we're keeping one eye on the EU regulations, which the new UK regs are likely to be very closely aligned to. And work is also progressing on certification for ISO 13485, which is the quality management standard for medical devices. The last piece of legislation, and perhaps the one with the biggest impact for the DHCW, is the duty of quality. Engagement has now begun with each directorate through the quality business partners to define the quality processes in each area that we can use to build our quality reports and to map business processes against the new quality standards. The first workshop was held with the finance team in Q3, which was very well received actually, and my team are planning a series of workshops across all SLTs and then down to team level as we move forward. We've also produced the first always-on report under the duty of quality, and we were in fact the first NHS body in Wales to produce an always-on report, and that is available on our external website, and the the next Ozone report is, I've actually approved it this morning, so that'll go through a governance process and will also be published. Just some key activities then as we move into Q4. So the workshops I mentioned will be rolled out. Also, as part of the duty quality, we'll be rolling out quality improvement training and building on the toolkit that we started developing in line with this year's IMTP milestones. Working with the National Duty Quality Group to finalise the quality impact assessment toolkit, which we will then roll out across the HCW, and developing a product-based quality framework to sit alongside that. Chair, I don't know whether you want me to take questions on that report before I move on to the annual report.
Yes, thank you, Paul. It's a lengthy report which underlines the huge amount of activity that's been successfully and consistently delivered by your area. So thank you for that. And perhaps I could, before I open it out, take this opportunity to congratulate the team on being shortlisted in the NHS Wales Awards recently, which was great news. So congratulations on that. Are there any questions for Paul? Ruth?
Thanks, Paul. Love quality, as you know, long time fan. I think this is really thorough, really good piece of work, and I just wondered what, if anything, we as a committee or the wider board could do to strengthen the support for the work across the organisation. Obviously, you know, a lot of work has been done. Very keen that quality isn't just an appendix to our IMTP, but actually the language and quality measures are throughout that report. So it should be part of everything that we do on a daily basis. I just wondered if there was anything that, as a committee, you would like to see from us in terms of supporting that programme.
Thanks, Ruth. Yeah, it's an interesting point, because I've got a board development session. Laura, correct me if I'm wrong, I think it's March the 7th. And that is ostensibly to discuss the duty of quality and the board requirements around that. But you'll note from next year's annual plan, there's actually 10 pages of objectives listed out in that plan. And I wonder whether maybe I could use that session to not just discuss duty of quality, but the wider quality requirements as outlined in that plan.
Thank you, Paul. I think that's a good idea, and an excellent question, Ruth, which we can come back to at that development session. Mark?
Yeah, very quickly, thanks, Chair. It's just to thank Paul, really. The session with finance went really well. I know we were a bit guinea pigs. I think we were the first ones, and in particular, you know, in terms of raising awareness and what it means to finance as a department, I think it was really key, because what we find is obviously quality is, you know, usually linked to the clinical perspective and hospitals, and how we can play that into the finance space was a really useful full exercise.
Thank you, Mark, and I'm sure we echo those comments and welcome the positive nature of that session. I don't think there are any further comments, Paul, so can you please take us through the annual quality plan then you've got proposed for 24-25?
Yes, yeah. Of course, thanks, yeah. Just share my screen.
Yes, we're seeing that. Great.
Thank you. There may be some repetition in this presentation from the previous report, so I'll try and skip over those where I spot them. I think it was a little bit slow reacting. Apologies. There we go. So yeah, just to pick up a few key deliverables from last year, as outlined in the annual plan. So we've had a large degree of success engaging with the organisation around iPassport, and there are currently over 950 documents authorised within the system. But we've also, in Q3, rolled out the quality management modules around checklists, standards, internal and external audit, and non-compliance management. And critically, from a cyber perspective, SAML authentication via the Active Directory has been implemented. SAML is a form of multi-factor authentication, so there's now a single sign-on to the system. We're also piloting a change control module, and we've conducted a small pilot, but we're going to expand that quite significantly moving into the new year. The internal audit program continues to run successfully. We've trained to date more than 40 colleagues across the organisation as internal auditors. And as you pointed out, Chair, we were shortlisted for the NHS Wales Awards for the work on the programme. Unfortunately, we were runners-up rather than winners, but it's still a great achievement for the team, and I am really proud of the work that they've done. We've also implemented a series of quality business partners who now attend every Directorate's SRT meeting and provide information on performance against IMS document position and non-compliances, amongst other things. I think it's important to highlight the development within the team as well. I mean, we've trained a number of the team now as lead auditors in both ISO 9001 and ISO 13485. We've also developed and provided training for the quality team on the use of some quality improvement tools and methodologies, and made sure we've kept at the cutting edge of regulatory updates for the validation team. And close to all our hearts is the team being recognised in the staff awards and winning the quality award named after Conrad, who was my predecessor. The next set of slides, I've just tried to capture some of the work from the current year and then the objectives for next year on the same slide by portfolio area. So as you'll see from quality standards, we've recertified or gained new certification to 6 external standards. And moving forward, we're looking to certify to both ISO 13485 and ISO 22301. But also, I think quite importantly, benchmark standards that we have against other digital organisations across the NHS in all nations. The duty of quality, as I mentioned, we were the first organisation to publish an always-on report under the duty of quality, and held the first workshop with Mark's team. Moving into the new year, we'll be publishing the first annual quality report during Q1, and also rolling out those duty of quality workshops through all directorates within the organisation. And the purpose of those workshops really is, you'll notice on the slide we've got the quality standards. It is looking at how we can look at the non-clinical functions specifically to make sure we're capturing those quality standards within the work of each team across the whole organisation. Moving on to medical devices, I've mentioned the delay in the new regulations coming into force. The 75% completion of the MDR compliance project plan last year, just to mention that is exactly where we expected to be. So we are on track with the medical devices work. And as reported in previous meetings of this committee, we have assessed our entire service portfolio against the medical device regs, and have implemented a process through new service requests, CAB and YAG, to assess any new projects and programmes coming through. So for next year, we will aim to be certified to 13485 and also finalise the procedures required to manage medical devices and make regulatory submissions for any of our services that are identified as medical devices. The work on iPassport, so the achievements from last year I've already mentioned, so I won't rehash that. Once pending management board approval of the document management strategy, I don't want to tempt fate. We have a migration plan in place where existing documents that need migrating, my team will handle that on behalf of the document owners, but then we'll work with document owners to identify documents that gaps in procedures, etc., that need to be created and moved to iPassport. We'll also be looking to explore additional iPassport modules. So, for example, I've had some conversations with Julie Ash. There's an equipment module within the system that can handle things like pre-planned maintenance schedules and so on. So we'll be looking into that through the new year. but also within the standards module. And we started this work already, and the auditor that we met with yesterday and my team are currently meeting with now really liked this functionality where you can link documents to the specific clauses on the standards that are held on iPassport. So when an auditor is discussing a particular clause, you can show them all the relevant documents on the management system relating to it. The internal audit program, on top of what I've already discussed, we've also developed an additional module specifically to ISO 9001 for our internal auditors. And in the coming year, we're going to support Standardies to develop this specific training for each of our external standards. We've done some work on cross-clause analysis across all the ISO standards so we can have one audit that captures all relevant clauses across all of our standards. And in the next year, we're going to review the use of the AI tools to strengthen those cross-clause analysis work. And I mentioned once again, we were runners up at the NHS Wales Award because I don't get tired of saying that. This slide is around WIAG, which may be relatively unfamiliar to this committee because the detailed WIAG reports go to the Digital Governance and Safety Committee. But during the last year, there have been 74 project papers that have come through WIAG, and that actually makes it the busiest year WIAG have had since its inception in 2015. The main objective for next year is the process was developed in 2015 and hasn't changed much since then. So the plan for next year is to progress the work we've already started on modernising the process, and we're at the end stages now of developing and testing a power app that the Centre of Excellence have developed with us, which should make huge strides forward in the way the assurance process works for the organisation. Lastly, from a portfolio perspective, is validation. So it's been a very busy year for the validation team. Actually, they've successfully validated the blood transfusion module of the WLIM system, multiple endoscopy feeds into WRS, and the new critical care system, as well as the first part of the electronic prescription service. Moving into the new year, there are lots of programs that we're still validating, so that kind of BAU will continue. But additionally, what we've found from some of the national programs we've worked on is validation expertise at health board level is somewhat lacking in lots of our health board colleagues. So what we're exploring is the potential of offering validation as a service to health boards in Wales. So we'll conduct local level validation for them. But obviously, we'll be looking at making this a chargeable service. And then also looking at our approach to computer systems validation to try and fit in more with our programme colleagues with an agile mindset. And just finally, just some additional objectives that didn't quite fit into any of the portfolio areas. So we will continue to try to increase the visibility of quality across DHCW. The duty of quality workshops will be a massive factor in that, but we'll also continue to hold 10 talks and post articles in the Insider newsletter on a regular basis. We've begun developing a quality assurance profession map, which will initially support professional development plans for the quality team. But what we're looking at in line with the duty of quality is where we can tap into training for the wider organisation on quality requirements, and also further rollout of the toolkit I mentioned. So we started with DMAIC as one tool, but there's a number of tools listed on this slide that we'll be looking to roll out over the next year. And also developing an organisation site master file, which is a requirement of regulatory inspections, not so much from external audits, but certainly with medical devices, the regulators will expect to see a master file that outlines what the business of the organisation is and any regulatory impact therein. And finally, I'm looking to implement a director-led but quality-supported GEMBA process where the quality team will support our exec directors in walking the floor to directly observe activity with their teams and use that as an extra quality improvement tool. That's it. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Paul. That's a really very clear presentation, and thank you for highlighting some of those key areas for us, which helps our understanding. And noting, of course, that much of the programmes, the activity you've outlined is regularly presented at Digital Governance, but it's also very helpful for Audit Committee to get that overview as well of what's happening in your particular area. And I think what's clear from the report, there's been an awful lot of activity in the past year, but clearly a lot more to come in 24-25. And thank you for presenting that plan to us, which we note. I can't see any hands up, which I think is a reflection of the detail presented in your report and in your presentation. So thank you again for your attendance, and we look forward to that development session and any actions perhaps that come out of that specifically for support, which perhaps the Audit Committee can consider moving forward. Diolch yn fawr, Paul.
Christoph.
Let's move then on to the agenda item 5.2, which is the Estates Decarbonisation and Compliance Report. It's my pleasure now to invite Julie Ash to present that report for us, which we are being asked to note. Julie.
Thank you very much, Chair. And as you correctly introduced it, I'll split it into three parts, which is the estates update, decarbonisation, and the environment. So I'll just take you through the key highlights of that, if that's okay. So firstly, on the estates, we did commission a staff survey to see what our workforce wanted to see from the estates to encourage them to come in and be in the office productively. And from that, there were a number of key themes that came out, which I'm pleased to say we've been able to develop actions against. And we've presented these to the local partnership forum and to the board. So we're continuing to work through that. So hopefully that's all very positive. Some unexpected things came up, such as people weren't aware of perhaps how to report faults and things. So we've addressed that now, and there's a new system in place for that. So that's all quite positive. The next point on estates was on the Welsh Government call for rationalisation plans from all organisations. So pleased to say we submitted ours on time. We'd already undertaken some work in this area, which the committee will be aware of, as in we'd closed some offices and reduced space in others. So we actually met, Helen, Chris and myself met with Welsh Government at the beginning of December to present our plan, and they were pleased to receive that, and they felt that we were taking all acts that we could in terms of our properties. So that was good. So the one outstanding area we're looking to do is to reach agreement with our landlord in Technium to reduce our footprint. So again, that contributes as well to the decarbonisation agenda, so all linked there. But also wanted to make the committee aware of the fact that we're progressing 2 new leases. One is a renewal of the lease for Tiglan Avon. That's not due yet, but we're starting discussions with the landlords at their request. And as part of that, there is opportunity to request them to undertake some works for us. So we're looking to improve accessibility in that building. We're also looking to progress a 5-year renewal of lease at Boken Park. So that's all in hand and going forward. So again, both of those renewals were presented to board and approved in January. As I referred to earlier, I think we were talking about in the workforce discussions, we are having constructive discussions with other NHS organisations with regard to shared space, and indeed we're having some interest in them sharing our space, which is quite good. So I'll just mention 3 of the people we're talking to at the moment. One is the NHS Confederation, who are based currently in Cathedral Road in Cardiff. They're interested in sharing some of our space in our Cardiff office. Betsy Cadwallader in North Wales, which is always positive, looking for some space possibly to use in Media Point, and Wisk, who are looking for some space in North Wales. So all very positive discussions going forward. Just moving on to decarbonisation. So we're now part of the quarterly what's termed DCR reporting regime, which is decarbonisation coordination reporting, which goes into shared services and is then reported to Welsh Government. So we produced our Q3 return, and that was submitted on the 25th of January ahead of target, and identified improvements in a number of areas. One thing I hadn't put in the report, which has been quite a recent development and may be of interest to the committee, is there's a project under the climate change programme called Approach to Healthcare, which looks at how digital can contribute to the decarbonisation agenda. So I'm pleased to say we've actually got a meeting between us and Welsh Government to discuss that going forward, because at the moment it's a little unclear how that's measured. So we just wanted to try and get a bit of clarity around that, and maybe a way forward for being able to measure the impact of our systems on decarbonisation across Wales. Finally, just to move on to environmental and compliance. So pleased to report our overall compliance of plant systems and equipment is 98%, which is well above our target of 90%. And even more pleased to report that our internal plan preventive maintenance is currently at 100%, which is, again, well ahead of our target, and well, couldn't be better, to be honest. So really pleased with progress in that area. We have had an enhanced focus on that because we did see a drop about 8 months ago, but it's continued to be at a very good level going forward. So I think that was it. Happy to pick up any highlights or questions or whatever. Thanks.
Diolch, Julie, and Ruth.
Thank you, Julie. It was just your final point that I wanted to pick up on. Actually, the maintenance is really good. That's really strong, and I think I'd note that there has been a lot of issues across a lot of sectors with finding enough of a skilled workforce to keep maintenance levels, at an acceptable level. And just that's more power to the teams that we've been able to achieve that. So I think that is a really good a really good place to be in, particularly when it comes to our decarb agenda. Making sure that everything is maintained properly, yes, and we're on top of things is one of the key things that we can do. So yeah, well done for that. I just wanted to say thank you.
No, thank you, Ruth. That is appreciated, and it was an area I think we felt we needed to focus on, because we did see a slight drop, as I said, just within the last year, but now in quite a good position, I think, and keen to ensure we stay there.
Can I add my congratulations as well? That enhanced focus is clearly paying huge dividends, and it just demonstrates what can be done with appropriate focus. So our thanks and congratulations to the team on that.
Thank you.
Laura.
Thanks, Marion. Just a comment, if I can. It was just to say it's really good to see the accessibility being looked at TGA. I think that's really important for us. But also the engagement with staff, I think, has been really good to see across the organisation. So I've had feedback to myself that staff feel more connected to the organisation, and have felt that their feedback and contributions have been taken on board. When you've presented, what you've done, they're learning from what they're asking you. And I think that's really nice to hear, and it links really nicely to our put people first in our long-term strategy. So I think the engagement's been really, really well done. So well done to Julie and the team.
Diolch, Laura. Thank you. And can I just say it's pleasing also to hear about the discussions about sharing our vacant office space, or sort of making the very best use of our footprint, which is very welcome both in North and South Wales. And finally, the decarbonisation returns are very pleasing to note, reflecting, I think, very clearly the improvements that we are making to reduce our carbon footprint. So thank you for bringing that detail to the committee, Julie. So we are being asked to note the content of the report, which in the main is extremely positive indeed. Diolch yn fawr. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair.
We'll move on then to the corporate risk report, agenda item 5.3. And I'd like to invite our board secretary, Chris Starling, to present the update on the corporate risk register. Chris.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, so I'm just going to run through the risk profile position and the risks assigned to this committee. So there's 19 risks on the corporate risk register at present. 3 of those are assigned to this committee. So the remaining risks are allocated for oversight and assurance to the Digital Governance and Safety Committee and the Programmes Delivery Committee. So just to recap, the new committee has had a number of risks transfer over to them that are programmatic in nature. From an audit and assurance perspective, we've included within the papers all the risks, but I'm just going to pick out those relating to this committee. There's 2 new ones since the last meeting that have gone onto the corporate risk register: 0329 Choose Pharmacy, DHCW maintaining the funding gap, and 0331 fixed term resource funding. In terms of changes in risk scores, you'll recall at the last committee meeting we had the deep dive, the annual analysis of risks and their movement over the last 12 months. Since then, 0259, the staff vacancies has been removed from the corporate risk register, but it's still very much, as picked up in the structured assessment report, something that we're focusing a lot of time on through the strategic resourcing group chaired by Sarah Jane Taylor. So I was just going to ask Mark if you would be happy just to give an update on those 3 risks currently on the corporate risk register. So just to be clear on what those are: 0313, the digital cost pressure, service model changes, the Choose Pharmacy funding gap, and the fixed term resource funding risk. Mark, are you happy to pick those up?
Happy to, Chris, and I'll pick up and I'll probably shed a bit of put a bit of meat on the bones to some of those risks if I can, by way of context, really. In terms of 313, the digital cost pressure and the service model changes, it's twofold really. It's the transition from capex model to an opex model, so a capital based model to an operational service model. And in particular, the first element is the transition to cloud. Currently, we have an external supplier in who's identifying a migration plan, and that will help inform the economy statements, the economic plan, and economic statement, and the financial plan in terms of our transition and migration into cloud. And that will be incorporated within our financial plan in terms of the choices we have in the next financial year. Of course, one of the key considerations is affordability. So we'll see what the outcome of that particular exercise is and how that's considered by the executive board here at DHCW. The second consideration is regards our suppliers, and in particular Citrix and VMware. As part of our contract management arrangements, we do perform horizon scanning, and that's a fallout really of some of the actions from previous risk mitigating strategies. And what we've done is identify future cost pressures likely to accrue next financial year in relation to Citrix and VMware. In terms of mitigation, we are negotiating with the suppliers, and we are also in discussion with organisations who consume those licenses as part of our national products in an attempt to increase the SLAs going forward. We have been in constant engagement with directors of digital and finance leads within all organisations, and it is forming part of our SLA discussions, which are currently underway this month. So I'll stop there in terms of if there's any questions on that particular pressure and MISC.
I can't see any hands up, Mark, so I think you've dealt with that issue quite comprehensively. So I'll hand back to Chris then. Thank you.
Would you like me to just pick up Choose Pharmacy, Chris, on 329?
Yeah, do you want to do the other two and then I'll
sure.
wrap?
So Choose Pharmacy is effectively a victim of its own success. What we're seeing is consultations over the last 4 years increased by over 350%. That has affected the infrastructure requirements. So there's a considerable pressure in terms of the primary care access gateway, and there's considerable resource requirements required going forward in order to maintain the service in a sustainable fashion. In terms of how we're going to mitigate this particular risk, we have over the last week received the latest assessment from the team and from the service in terms of the resource requirements going forward. There is an underlying pressure already identified within our indicative outlook for next financial year, and it does form part of our provisional balance for next financial year. So it is currently within our plan as a pressure. In terms of actually identifying and recruiting into some of those resource items that have been requested by the service leads, that'll be discussed at the scrutiny panel and also at the execs level. The last risk that you mentioned, Chris, 331, in terms of the fixed term resource availability and the funding implications of having short-term funding arrangements for substantive posts. It is currently being assessed by the Strategic Resourcing Group, and the exercise is due to culminate in a plan and a list of recommendations to be submitted to the executive team. As part of those recommendations, there will be assessment of the skill sets and how those particular skill sets can be either repurposed or indeed a more permanent sustainable funding secured by either Welsh Government or through other organisations. Happy to take questions.
Thank you, Mark. I can't see any hands up, but I just got one on the Choose Pharmacy. An increase of 350%, as you mentioned. Clearly, there's a lot of media coverage in terms of encouraging people to use pharmacy services, particular campaign which we are seeing on radio and television currently. So it's quite difficult to gauge the demand or the increased demand and to mitigate effectively against this risk, I think. What's your assessment going forward of the indicative increase we might see during the next financial year? And, it is clearly a cost pressure for us. How are we managing that effectively?
There are a couple of things I think we can do in terms of particularly the technical design and technical architecture. So we can move from on-premise into a cloud-based solution, which may help in terms of cost reduction and reliance on the primary care access gateway and the licensing overhead that is inherent within that. In terms of the forward look, the additional resources that have been identified by the service lead in primary care, I believe will at least set us up for the next 2 years, given the focus on Choose Pharmacy. However, it is going to be a case of, like I said, we've been a victim of our own success in certain ways, and particular uptick will need, I guess, review on a periodic basis.
Thank you, Mark. And I've got Ruth wants to come in. Thank you, Ruth.
Thanks, Marion. Thanks for the update, Mark. It's really helpful. I think we've been very clear about the cost pressures that we are subject to at DHCW, and we've spoken about that at length at this committee. previously and today. But I think what's quite striking about the risks that are coming through onto the risk dashboard now is that we are now really starting to see those cost pressures and resource pressures impacting on the health boards, particularly in some of those programme delivery committee risks. So I think that's just something that we now really, we've known that it was going to happen, I think, but now I think we need to start talking about delivery risk as well as just the financial pressures that we're under, because that's certainly the position that we will start to find ourselves in. I anticipate more and more often as we go through the coming year with the pressures across the whole of the system.
Thank you for that observation, Ruth. And Claire wants to come in now.
Yeah, I think that's a really valid point, actually, because if you look at the digital priorities investment funding, now the development is getting there, and we're seeing the rollout of the app, the pharmacy systems, and inevitably they're all, because of the way it was funded, they're all coming at once. So that then leads to quite a full digital implementation plan for next year, on top of what will be a transformational plan for many health boards at the same time. So it does really highlight the merit of having a really coordinated roadmap that coordinates the funding, the priorities in a way that enables us to manage that pipeline a bit more effectively going forward. And I think that's certainly one thing the directors of digital have raised, and it's something we will really be taking forward, is really how do we get the right balance through the cycle. But yeah, really good point.
Thank you, Claire, for echoing that. And finally, Marilyn, Brian Jones.
Oh, just reiterating what has already been said, really, and also perhaps for us to make that point more loudly as well to Welsh Assembly Government, because ultimately it's going to be an absence of service delivery. Just going to be felt, really. It's all right about saying the funding, but ultimately, if services won't exist, or choices will have to be made about which services get turned off and which ones we stay on. So I think there's some very difficult choices, but I think that we need to make that even more loud and clear, really, to our Assembly Government about the part they play in this as well.
Thank you, Marilyn, and that's a point well made, and we'll raise that at board level as well. Diolch yn fawr. So, Chris, anything? I'll hand back to you then to wrap up this agenda item.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, and I think one of the principles within our long-term strategy is more digital, more data, or more data, more digital. I can't remember which way around it is. That is a fact. By 2030, there will be more digital and more data being used across NHS Wales. And I think how we manage the financial pressures, constraints, sustainable funding for both live services like Choose Pharmacy and for all the development programs that we have, the risk profile we have is very much, there's a lot of pressure, but we also know there's going to be an exponential increase in how we're using digital and data. So I think item 5.7 that we'll come on to, Claire and Mark will talk through the IMTP planning and where we've got to in terms of how we're looking at next year. But it is something for us as a board, I think we need to be aware of and consider as we look at the IMTP and the long-term strategy moving forward. But for today, it was just to note the 3 risks that are currently allocated to this committee. Thanks, Mark, for the update on each of those.
Thank you, Chris. And so we note the status of the risk register and the risks assigned to this committee. And thank you, Chris, for the clarity of the report and your presentation. Moving, we've got 20 minutes left and 2 agenda items before we finish. The next is agenda item 5.6, as we've already dealt with 5.4 and 5.5. And this is the procurement and scheme of delegation compliance report. And I'll now invite Julie Francis to present this report. Julie.
Diolch. Pnawn da, pawb. Okay, so for the period of the 1st of September to the 31st of December 2024, the committee is required to note that there were 2 single tender actions, the value of 296,000, 1 change control note at the value of £735,000, and all were undertaken in accordance with the standard financial instructions. In all instances, these procurements were required to provide continuity of existing services and special advice. But I would, however, like to bring to the board's attention one retrospective award. This was for a call-off of a work package to a value of £33,000 under an existing framework for additional resource. So I'd also like to share with the committee at this point some key points in terms of how we have been addressing and how we will be continuing to address this matter going forward. So firstly, this activity, is what we call self-service, and is part of a new process which we are continuing to embed across the organisation. This aims at giving users more flexibility over the call-off of resources themselves, but has come at a small price to the governance process in this instance. We have continued to deliver training and oversight, including a programme of refresher training in terms of not only the process, but the consequences of not following this process and standing financial instructions in this regard. We've also got in draft a development of a review and lessons learned process in relation to the self-service approach, which will be shared at board level in the next 2 months. And we are also continuing to report and escalate any areas of non-compliance to our various boards and governance mechanisms operating within the organisations. Finally, we are dealing with our key messages to suppliers in relation to the requirement to adhere to compliant activity, i.e. no work to be undertaken without a valid contract being in place. And this is undertaken by the contract management and supplier engagement process in operation. I hope that addresses your assurances going forward. Thank you,
Julie. Diolch yn fawr. Thank you for that very clear report. And the committee is being asked to note the procurement scheme of delegation compliance report. You've been clear in your presentation, clear in your report, and I don't think there are any questions being flagged today, Julie. Diolch yn fawr I chi. We'll move on then to the finance update, agenda item 5.7. And I'd like to invite Mark Cox now, the Associate Director of Finance, and our Executive Director of Finance, Claire Osmondson-Little, to present this update. I can see that it's going to include an update on the planning allocations, the assumptions, and critically the financial sustainability work at this late stage of the current financial year. It's been a recurrent theme throughout this audit committee, the challenges that we're facing. So I'll hand over to you, Claire, perhaps first, and we'll hear from Mark in due course. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. And it's that time of year, so we've got sort of two things crossing, the end of one year and the beginning of another. I'm going to hand over to Mark in a minute, but just to give you a flavour, we are yet to have our formal allocation letter, but we have great insight into what the contents are. And that really reflects some of the messaging and some of the positioning we've done. We've talked in the risk about inflationary pressures. We've talked about energy and what the impact of that has been on DHEW. And actually in our allocation that was given earlier, it was made very clear that it would be consistent with health boards and trusts, which is slightly different to the position earlier in the year, where they recognised the inflationary pressures and they gave us a 3.7. Oh, I've spoiled your thunder now, Mark. Sorry, apologies. They've given us, or yet to be confirmed, our 3.7%. So given our complexity in terms of funding streams, it does take a bit longer than the norm to bottom out. But I know Mark's going to touch on that. And then in terms of the year-end accounting, We are keen, following last year, to ensure that we iron out any creases in the process and have a clear escalation in the way we interact with both internal and external audit during the audit process. So Mark will highlight our timescale and what we're doing to smooth out any creases in that. So without further ado, I'll hand over to Mark, and obviously I'll take up any questions later. Thanks, Mark.
Thank you. Thanks.
Thank you, Claire. Just check, can you hear me?
Yeah.
Okay, I'll pick up on the standard agenda item first, and that's the high value orders. So this particular item on the agenda highlights orders over 750k, which is the board threshold, and provides details on the governance around the approval process and ensuring that that's been considered by the board. It also identifies and presents cumulative orders which have met the threshold for 750k. There are details in terms of the appendices. What I would like to pick up out is just a couple of items, I think, given the time. The first is the ASCOM order. Just for a matter of accuracy, really, we have two orders. The one order, the £2.1 million order, actually replaces the other order. So we only have one order which we're committed to, and that order is an order for completion of a milestone and the delivery of infrastructure and the successful testing of the system. The next item I want to bring to your attention is the LIMS achievement of milestones, and in particular I'd like to highlight that actually has been paid. So the milestone has been completed and been signed off by the organisation, and in fact we've got the infrastructure tested at the data centre. The last item I'd like to bring to your attention is the additional contractual obligation in relation to the SEAM cloud offering. That's been approved by the board and reflects our strengthened cybersecurity posture and planning for the next financial year. Another area I thought might be of interest to the committee is the possible support to the decarbonisation agenda in terms of the employee vehicle leasing arrangements. This sort of links in, I guess, to Julie's briefing, and I'd just like to bring to your attention the number or the proportion of leased vehicles which are actually electric in nature. So 74% of our leased vehicles are actually electric, and I think one thing that might be interesting is to identify the opportunity to go through this leasing arrangement, how that's affected the decision making in terms of procuring an electric vehicle and consequently supporting the decarbonising agenda. So I'd just like to I guess pause for thought on that point and submit this report, this update for note.
Thank you. That's very helpful and useful to highlight our high level usage of electric lease cars. I don't think there are any contributions, any questions, Mark, so I'll hand over back to you both to continue. Thank you.
Thanks, Marion. And I'd just like to pick up on this agenda item, the preparation for end of financial year. So as Claire mentioned, last year was an interesting year. It was the implementation of the new standard on auditing, ISA 315. And in particular, I think that was an interesting process for both ourselves and Audit Wales. But before I bring in Mike and Sian in, I'll just, I suppose, give you some context in terms of where we are. I'd like to update you on where we are in relation to the lessons learned exercise. We've made considerable progress, and there are only two outstanding items which Sian will brief you on in terms of an update. The slides we've attached basically present the high-level timescales for delivery. We are looking to accelerate delivery of the accounts this year and provide a full audited set of accounts to the Audit Committee in June with the associated ISA 260. Preparation has started, so we're already progressing in terms of the end of year accounts, and there was a very helpful meeting attended by Audit Wales to the Board of Finance team, and effectively it was really useful in terms of clarifying the expectation, timelines and the context for the audit. So I'd like to thank Mike for attending that particular session. I'd just like to pass over to Sian, who's our Head of Financial Services and Reporting, and deeply involved in the financial accounts and leading the DHEW function, to highlight any key issues.
Good afternoon all. I'm just going to pick up some items in the report 5.72. So I'm going to pick up All Wales technical consideration, emerging local issues, engagement, and then DHEW action on the 22-23 accounts, observations and recommendations from Audit Wales. So there are some technical considerations and emerging issues identified in the 23-24 accounts, and they're included in more detail in Appendix A, the slides. Where these issues have an All Wales impact, they will be discussed at the All Wales Technical Accounting Group to ensure a consistent approach is applied across Wales. DHEW will also liaise with Audit Wales and seek advice from their technical team where appropriate. So we've discussed some of these items before, but I've got a few to bring to the attention of the committee today. IFRS 16, the standard that was brought in last year, as Julie mentioned earlier in the meeting, there are a number of new leases, and DHEW are migrating to a new data hall, which will result in an additional lease in the latter part of 23-24. So lease arrangements will continue to be reviewed and ensure compliance with IFRS 16. Another area of the accounts is provisions. So in 22-23, DHEW had a 9.7 million provision in the accounts in relation to the recovery of Microsoft VAT. It is unlikely there'll be a decision from HMRC this year on the treatment of the VAT recovery. So it's likely this provision will remain and will in fact increase to over 15 million. There is an associated contingent liability payment to NHS bodies on recovery of their VAT, so that will increase as well. And the last item of note to bring to the committee is on digital eye care, that we will review the transition of the programme from Cardiff and Vale and ensure the correct treatment and presentation is correct within the accounts. So they're the items of note. In terms of engagement, Mark touched upon some of the engagement we've done with Audit Wales. When we receive the deliverable requirement, we will publish our detailed closure plan. This will include a detailed timeline, timetable, deadlines, and name responsible officers, which will be reviewed frequently all through the accounts process. The detailed closing pack, for use within the finance team, sets out key deadlines and processes to be followed for the main areas of the accounts. This ensures that the rules are understood and applied consistently. Furthermore, there'll be communication that goes out in February to all areas of DHEW staff so they know their roles and deadlines within the closure process. Regular meetings will take place with Audit Wales from now until the sign-off of the accounts. And just again, like to thank Mike for coming to meet the finance team to emphasise the importance of their role within the annual accounts. Finally, during the audit of the last year accounts, Audit Wales made some observations and recommendations. So the first was on responses could have been received in a more timely manner. And the second was around the draft staff report, that the staff report did not comply with the requirements of the Welsh Government Manual for Accounts. In order to address these, we put together a post-accounts learning exercise, and we brought this to Audit Committee in October. It included an action plan, and furthermore, there's the establishment of a task and finish group with Workforce to ensure that there are additional reviews of the staff report in 23-24. So of the 18-point lesson learned action plan, this is contained in Appendix B. Pleased to confirm 16 have been completed or on target, and the 2 that remain, the one is interim testing, which was brought up earlier, that will take place in March. And also the last one was on the accounts template. So we have had an update of Welsh Government, and we are looking to maybe clarify what the heading premises means in terms of digital organisation. So I'll update the Audit Committee once that's formally agreed. So I think that's all in terms of my
Thank you,
update on the annual accounts.
Thank you, Sian. And that last point will be a big win, I think, for the organisation in terms of the accounts presentation. Thanks for that. So, sorry, in the interest of time, I guess, Mike, is there anything you'd want to bring to the party in terms of this agenda item?
Nothing really to add, Mark. Thank you for on top of what's already been said. You know, just to kind of to reiterate what Sian's been saying, I think, you know, we get really positive, constructive engagement from Sian and Mark and the team. You know, and I really welcome the opportunity to come to the wider finance team meeting, and it was really pleasing that from my perspective wasn't just a tell session from me. There was kind of positive engagement from people outside of the core finance team as well, and, you know, providing that question and challenge back to us, which I think is really healthy. So I really welcome that opportunity. And I also kind of think, as you said, Claire, it's just about kind of ironing out any minor bumps in the road. You know, we did make some recommendations last year, but let's not lose sight of the fact that it was a successful audit that was delivered by the deadline, which was really positive outcome. So, you know, whilst we're kind of putting the finessing touches on it, you know, let's not lose sight of the fact that it was a really good process. I think just to confirm timeframes, we've written out to, I've got the letter in front of me, so bear with me while I read it, to NHS Directors of Finance, Audit Committee Chairs and Board Secretaries on the 5th of February. So hopefully you've received that letter confirming the national deadline of 15th of July for us to conclude that work. But Mark and Sian have already engaged with us on that, and we are absolutely on board with trying to meet that target of the end of June, as Sian set out in a presentation. So, yeah, happy to report. There's nothing to report from our perspective. I think all the preparation that Sian and the team are putting in and engaging with us has been really positive, and it's nice to be able to give that nice message to the committee this morning.
Thank you, Mike, and thank you, Mark and Sian, for the clarity of that update, which gives us assurance that we're all on the same page for sure, and noting as well that accelerated target for completion of the final accounts. Claire, is there anything you'd want to add before I draw this discussion to a close?
No, I think it's yeah, we've got the best finance team in the NHS in Wales. We know that already, but yeah, so yeah, I think it's just recognition that this is quite intensive time for the team. It starts now really, and it will probably end the 15th of July. No, so it is an intensive time for the team. I think it's also a time when we're trying to finalise annual plans and the forthcoming outlook, which again is challenging for us, given that we're now in the middle of February and we haven't bottomed out or had formal confirmation of allocation. But despite that, I think we're quite agile, so we'll work with Welsh Government to bring that to a close pretty soon. So yeah, no, I welcome the feedback, and it's good. We do have an open and transparent types of philosophy in the team, and that's clearly coming through, which is really great. So thank you, Mike.
Thank you, Claire, and thank you to the whole team. And we note that finance update, which was very helpful indeed. So on to part 6 and closing matters then. And in terms of the committee highlight report to board, I've noted a number of issues, including the non-compliance with SFIs, which was highlighted in the procurement scheme delegation report, the workforce issues that we explored in our deep dive, the structured assessment. Clearly there are issues and recommendations and responses there, which we will highlight, but I understand the structured assessment will be formally presented to board at the end of March in any event. There's the benefits realisation, internal audit, some of the changes in risk management, changes to our risk profile, and clearly the financial update we've just received. If there is anything else that colleagues would want to add, please perhaps you could send me those separately outside of the committee. I don't have any other business to report. Is there anything else I should be aware of, Chris? No, if not then. we have a 10-minute comfort break before we recommence our private session at 12:40. The date of our next meeting is the 16th of April. So all is that remains for me is to thank you all for your engagement and your contributions. Can I also thank Chris, Laura, Julie and the team for all your support in making this committee happen. Very grateful to you all. And thank you to my colleagues as IMs as well for your contributions this morning. Diolch yn fawr I chi gyd. And for those of you who are attending the private session, I will see you at 12:40. I think we've made good progress, good time, and look forward to seeing you all again in mid-April. Diolch yn fawr a da bo. Thank you.
Thank you.